Okay. We're going to start from like a really base level here. So this, what you're looking at right here, is like basically, oh, I'm modding a primary weapon .png, right? Are we all agreed on this? That this is basically modding a primary weapon .png? Yeah, pretty much. Yes, yes. Default. Yep. Yes. Only build. Yes. Okay. Yeah. It's the build. Sometimes you put in primed cryo. That's true. If I wanted to put in one more Forma, then I would put in primed cryo rounds. You're absolutely right. Only if it's crit. But yeah, but I mean the weapons that we actually use are crit though. Armaments instead of munitions sometimes. Sure. Wait, where's the ammo drum? Yeah. But yeah. With some minor, like little, like one mod being tagged out in this build, usually it'd be Hunter Munitions being tagged out for shred or like some other very minor adjustments. This is the build. This is what goes on all of them. Obviously, that's a huge problem. So the immediate reaction to this is, well, you just get rid of Serration, Split Chamber, Point Strike, and Vital Sense. Right? So, here's the deal. That is the right answer, but here's the thing. If we have innates, which is to take Serration, Multi-Shot, Crit Chance, and Crit Damage, and Status Chance, and make it its own different upgrade tree that is not related to modding, we incur some consequences. Is it really that big of a problem that this is the default build? Yeah, having a default build is the problem, because it's not modding. You're just making the default build.
There are really builds in Warframe for weapons. Akimbo auto-crit weapons are the biggest offense.
Yeah. Correct. Heavy caliber needs to also be removed. Right. So Serration, Multi-Shot, Crit Chance, Crit Damage, Status Chance. Consequences of the simplified option is that there are enough suboptimal damage mods to just simply slot those in instead. Builds are just as stale. Power creep with only a minor benefit. Because if these mods all become innate, along with some Status Chance, then it just looks like this. It just looks like this now. Instead of the regular crit mods, we now have the conditional crit mods because the regular crit mods are innate. And we use heavy caliber because it's Serration, but with a downside I can ignore. And we still use Hunter Munitions because it's just that good, and we're still using elemental mods. And then we're going to add like fire rate, and you're probably going to put a Bane in here. I wouldn't put crit mods in that camp. Why not? How can you not put crit mods in that camp? Because crit mods do go on everything. Right? They go on everything that has any iota of crit, and most of the things that we use in the game, period, are crit. Yeah, everything that we actually fucking use. They'd be conditional if status was worth it. Deciding between building crit or status is still a choice, Immo. But it's not really. Right? So, like, this is what builds become if we just do it that way. If we just do it, even if you go so far as to say, oh, well, you also make heavy caliber innate. Oh, and you also, like, make Hunter Munitions innate. It's like that removes those two mods, and then I just add 2 more elementals onto this build. And then we're in the exact same spot that we were in before, right? So what you have to do is you have to preserve the modding that we currently use. This is the modding that we currently use. And there's some really fucking simple elements that we use. We have 8 slots, and it's the mods determine our damage output. Super simple stuff. So, oh, wrong one. There it is. Boom. Ignore this. Don't look at that one. That's just card games.
Essentially, weapon modding at the moment is like getting half of a car, and modding just gets you to the complete car. When it should be you start with a complete car, and mods are to change it to your play style of choice.
Right.
B33 think.
Yeah, exactly. Nox, thank you for the 200 bits. Okay, so this is my idea for a mod system rework where you have mod classifications and innates. Because I think that the modding system is important to have some amount of damage be related to it so that people value it, but also it can't just only be damage. So, class 1 mods and class 2 mods and innates. The most important bit here is innates, and things that would be innates would be like Serration, Multi-Shot, all of our elemental mods, status chance, punch through, crit mods, hunter munitions, and fire rate. And all the like variations therein. Fire rate would include things like primed shred. Obviously, you're gonna have like primed cryo rounds, all that business. All of those types of mods are all umbrellaed under innates. One second. There we go. So all of those types of mods that are like the damage increasers, like the very clear 1-to-1 damage increasers, all become into the innates section. And these, okay, so I just described what it is here. These upgrades make up the backbone strength of any weapon, are available immediately, and don't require weapon levels to be used. So all of these things are really important, but I really want to hone in on this. So here's a huge thing here. This stuff is really important in that if you have innates, that means that new weapons are immediately able to be used for content. So we don't need to go to the loot cave and just like fucking drown in our sorrows on Hydron every time a new weapon comes out. Because the weapon can actually just do the content that we want to do. We can just use it for whatever we need to use it for. Whatever the content is that we need to go do. We can be like, oh, this is a new weapon. I'll pick it up and it'll be usable. It won't be leveled yet, but it'll be usable. And then when it's leveled, I can customize it how I want it to be. A la modding. So, how this would work is that innate levels are gained by using Endo on a given module and require the same amount as the prior mod equivalent. So no changes in the costs of anything. Prime modules as upgrades to existing nodes. So it's not very difficult to be like, oh, you have Shred as a module. Now you have Prime Shred as an upgraded module. None of this is surprising. Very easy 1-to-1. Most modules can be earned, however, there are starter modules, so starting all players out with Serration, Multi-Shot, and Fire Rate. So you still get a lot of these as drops, but the things that increase your, like, just straight-up power go in a different category than your customization. And then basic elemental modules would be given as an early junction reward, so you'd have access to, like, the full choosing your element system, and then have a limit of 8 innates active at a time chosen per weapon. So what it basically does is it separates the modding that we have now into a simple system that is not related to weapon rank or anything, and is just relating to the basic power of the weapon, and makes it so that we just have that off the bat, and it's continuous throughout all of our weapons once we have that system leveled. Once it's leveled, I can take it and be like, I picked up a Soma. Cool, I have all this stuff I can apply to the Soma. I don't need the points in the Soma to do it. I can just use the gun because I have acquired power through upgrading the modules. Okay? With that, obviously, then the question becomes, what the fuck do we do in this menu? What do we do here? And the answer is that you just make it more interesting by adding... Oop, one second. There we go. Vampire, thank you for the 200 bits.
I think for conversations like this benefit from the chat being visible on screen. I miss when you had it displayed.
That's fair. Well, I can't pop it up right now. But, so, Class 1 mods and Class 2 mods. So, Class 1 mods would be slot restricted, much like we have the Exilus slot now, and then all of our regular slots. More powerful weapons would have more Class 1 slots. These mods increase weapon power, but at lower levels than innates or circumstantially. So some good explanations of what these types of mods are things like Firestorm, where that's only for AoE weapons. Argon Scope, wherever you need to get headshots. Reload Speed, Banes, Spring-Loaded Broadhead is a good example. Aerial Ace, which is while you are aim gliding. All this stuff that's like conditional would be considered a Class 1 mod, because it would increase your power, but you need to meet requirements for it, or it's like a more niche thing. Like, you're going to get more damage out of an Argon Scope than you're going to get out of a Reload Speed on the majority of items, right? But Argon Scope is conditional, so those two things can weigh against each other, and those can legitimately fight. So those would be Class 1 mods. As an example, the Bratton has 1 Class 1 slot, and the Bratton Prime has 2 Class 1 slots. So as you get the Bratton Prime, it has more slots for you to use these more power-enhancing mods on it. This also opens up the possibility of upgrading weapons to have up to 4 Class 1 slots to add another evergreen reward to the game. This, I think, is possibly a replacement for, like, Exilis adapters, which are, like, kind of vestigial and not, like, that super useful. You can instead use those to take the Exceltra and be like, well, the Exceltra has 2 slots at base, but I can upgrade 2 more slots to become Class 1s. And then we have 4 kind of damage-ish mods that are conditional and interesting. And then we still have 5 slots for more to taste upgrades, which is a lot more than we have right now. So Class 2 mods are mods that don't increase DPS and are generally to taste convenience mods suiting the user preference on a given weapon. The example that I've given here is that Grakatas are really fucking good with stabilizer, but any kind of a sniper rifle has no use for stabilizer whatsoever. So it's a nice to-taste thing that you would use. Terminal velocity for bullet speed, ammo mutations, stabilizer, cautious shot for explosive weapons, ammo drum, twitch for switching your weapons faster. All of that type of stuff is not going to increase your damage in any way, but it's going to change some of the base functionality of your weapon to be more to what you need it to be. So like Hush is like, I don't need Hush on anyone except Avara. So basically quality of life mods. Right, exactly. What mod class would the mod Wildfire be? Magazine capacity and heat. So that would probably just be trimmed, or it would be given a different effect. Like there's some cases where like mods we don't use anyway can just be trimmed and it won't matter. Right? Because in this system, you're going to take your innates, which includes every elemental in the game, and you're going to get 8 like choices in there, right? Like once you have all those different things in your innates leveled, you choose 8 of them, and those go onto your weapon. What about mods that are weapon specific? So mods that are weapon specific are actually like, they fit pretty cleanly into one of those classes. So if we go here.
Right now the weapons exile slot is basically just ammo mutation slot, and that's kinda sad.
Yeah. That is true. So let's go to primaries, and you sort by rank is fine. So let's see here. Let's do... Whoops. Not click. Soma. So this thing. Each hit increases critical chance by 1.2%, resets upon holstering, reloading or holstering. That's a class 1 mod. It's conditional, and it increases damage. It being highly conditional, I think, is totally fine for this to be class 1. What about Rivens? You probably change the... So, Rivens you would have work the same way, but they would count as one of your innates. So really, for Rivens, it would just change visually, because I know that there's no way in hell I could convince DE to change them anyway but visually. Would upgrading the innates be per weapon or once as a player, aka weapon intrinsics? Yeah, they would basically be like weapon intrinsics. They would not be on a per weapon basis. It would be once per account. Similar to how Serration and stuff works now, it's once per account. But right now, it's unnecessarily like just hindering the game. Because one of the problems I think that's in Warframe right now is that like how do I put this? Whenever you're not MR30, whenever you're one of the people that are like regularly playing the game, if I go into this weapon and I decide I need to forma it to add another mod, I have to forma it, and then it's basically completely useless while I'm leveling it. And that's a problem. So innates not requiring your capacity up here to be like powerful means that you could go to a theoretical like innates station right here, level your innates, and then put that in, and then because you have your innates, you're strong enough to do the content.
That's true.
To level your weapon, to customize your weapon. Placid, thank you very much for the resub. Doesn't matter if it's a different type of game. You can still take go to learn from it. What's up? Weapon intrinsics is probably the best way to describe them, and probably still the ADD. But yeah, like that's the type of stuff we're talking about. Anyway, like for the weapons and stuff, I really don't think it's crazy to go into mods and like let's take oh god, what's a primary weapon that has an augment? Let's see here. They get used so little. Well, there's the Daikyu mods. There's like 3 of those, right? Yeah, here we go. But no. The spring-loaded broadhead is only for the Daikyu. So increase damage by 40% if the target is over 15 meters away. Class 1 mod. Really simple to like suss that one out. Scatter Justice. This is an innate. Like this one deals with multi-shot. It would be an innate. Right? It's an innate that's only available to the heck. I don't think that's crazy. Like you could translate them like really 1-to-1. You're basically just taking it and separating Tetra. Shots now bounce up to 6 times and travel 30% further. Oh, that one's kind of on the line. You could make an argument for class 1 or class 2 on this one. This one, however, is definitely a class 2. Both are class 2. I think there's some argument for this one to be class 1, but it's like probably leaning class 2. You're talking about separating mods into different categories based on their functionality? Right, exactly. So you take all of the stuff that we're using, like 100% using on every fucking weapon in the whole game, this shit, and you bust that out into its own system, and you instead take it and these mod types like multi-shot, just raw damage, crit stats, status, and elementals, those become innates, and you limit 8 innates on any given weapon. That would allow us to focus hold on. That would allow us to focus the modding on more quality of life, less circumstantial mods. It would simply mean that endgame players would just have the full damage status and crit bonuses on every weapon all the time. Or do you mean that we'd also choose elemental types, etc. within the 8 selection innates? I somehow doubt without elemental selection we would even have 8 innates to choose from. Yeah, no, you choose your elementals. You basically have the same types of choices, right? So like whenever you choose your elementals, you're like, okay, I need a toxin that is also 60% status, or I need a toxin that is 90%, or I've got the prime module, so I'm going to choose the cryo that is 165%.
Shut up and take my money.
Becca, thank you very much for resub.
Insert witty comment about 21 months here.
Yeah. The build we're looking at right now is an innate build. Then you get 4 more slots used for the quality of life mods. So no, you actually don't get 4 more slots used because the classification stuff that I've talked about here kind of changes the game up on that. So class 1 mods and class 2 mods. So this stuff would basically make it so that class 1 mods do have possible damage benefits, but they're either on a much lower level and more of a playstyle or choice to increase your damage. So you have stuff in here that's like Argon Scope, Conditional, requires stuff from you, gives you crit stats. Firestorm, only for AoE weapons, gives you more AoE, which is damage. Reload speed obviously directly affects DPS, and some weapons would want that. And then Bane mods are faction specific and increase your damage. So we'd have class 1 mods like this making up between 1 and 4 of a weapon's individual mod slots. So something that I explained in there is that if you have the regular Bratton, it probably only has 1 class 1 slot. Like if we're looking at it, like this slot is the one that's class 1 because it's a very beginner, like low level weapon, right? And then you have tons of slots that give you customization and just allow you to put in whatever else that you want to taste, like all of your different like customizations, like putting in ammo drums and putting in what's other mods that I don't use, overview, and all that kind of business, right? Like you have all those mods that just literally never get used. And those would be the types of mods that would go into these other slots. Main problem immediately seeing with this, build restrictions, which people would be against. How is it a build restriction? Because the other part of this is still keeping some of like what is the stuff with the modding system by making it so that if you start with a low amount of class 1 slots on a weapon for a lower level weapon, you can then use an item to increase up to a maximum of 4 class 1 slots. Does Brozime even play this game these days? Feels like this guy's still living in 2018 with outdated ideas. What about this is an outdated idea? Let me guess. Is an updated idea that I should run like 5 hours of defense and waste my time? Build restriction versus the current, you just use these mods? Yeah, because right now, it's like, yeah, of course, you just use the regular build. What if with innates we could choose element combos? Holy shit. What if with innates we could choose element combos too, so I could end up using viral toxin? I wouldn't be crazy like that. I mean, sure, you could go that road with it, but it's more about like separating out the must-use mods from the not. I think there's also a modding issue with Warframes or just with weapons. I think Warframes are already like much more interesting as a base level, right? Like obviously a lot of Warframes can come down to like you build for their power stats, but like they want different power stats.
At Brozime need to make a good ass tutorial for this in order to implement it, and then, you know, put that tutorial in the critical path and not in the codex.
For an MTG comparison, 1/8 of a specific mod type would be like you're only allowed 2 5 CMC cards in your deck. I mean, sure. I think there's also, but yeah, with Warframes, I don't see nearly as much of a modding issue because like the builds for Warframes are different. So all in all, transform the must-use mods into intrinsics. Well, it's transform the must-use mods into intrinsics, but it's not as simple as that because we went over what happens if you just take like the very baseline, like very low-level understanding of like what's good in Warframe, and you're like, ah, yes, the serration effects, the multi-shot, crit chance and damage and status chance. You just make those intrinsics and you just level those up, and then those just go on all weapons. The problem that happens whenever you do this shit is that we get weapons that like look like this. And if you're taking out heavy caliber because it's in like the serration category, then they look like this, and it's like, oh, okay, we're gonna use the best conditional mods for more crit, and then we're gonna use hunter munitions, and we're gonna use elementals, and there's gonna be another elemental right here. Like it's not a difficult thing to take all of what would be considered the tier 2 mods right now and be like, oh, those are the new tier 1 mods because the tier 1 mods got ascended into intrinsics. You have to take more of like a baseline look at it and be like, okay, are bladed rounds and Argon Scope interesting as modding options? And I think the answer is yes. They're both very good, like mods. If in like the new system, they would be very good. But you can't just like level everything up and then have it be like primed shred available and the like having the like primed cryo rounds and like infected clip just still be in here, because you're just gonna fill your build with like the really good conditionals and every other slot is an elemental. I'm gonna add an item for adding lower class slots. Can you remove Forma / Polarities? You would probably still keep Forma. But yeah, so like you have to change it on like a more basic level, because with this, you get class 1 mods, so you still have some power in your modding, right? And that also gives like the opportunity for like really high optimization if you go down the road of having it be that you can upgrade to 4 class 1 slots. That means you get 4 conditionals to use in any given build as long as you're willing to like put work into and max out a weapon super huge so that you can fit let's say bladed rounds, argon scope, a primed bane, and then, oh, I don't know, aerial ace. Or no, well, aerial ace is not a class 1. What's a good option here? What's considered a class 1? I'd probably consider fast hands to be like a class 1. We want to fit those 4 in and then still have 5 slots that are purely your to taste mods, such as stabilizer and stuff. I think that's totally fine. What mods would you even want to use, though? Like, I don't think I'm ever putting overview in. I mean, for me personally, it's like stuff like stabilizer. And let's see here. What would I actually... What is the what if scenario if doing this right? What do I want to put in? Let's say for all shot of example here that this is a weapon with 2 C1s in it. Like 2 class 1s are in this weapon, so I can choose 2. I'd probably... Let's say I choose Argon Scope, and I choose Bladed Rounds, because those are like... They're conditional mods, but they're very good. So let's just say those are my C1s. What else am I using? I definitely... For me personally, on like a lot of my weapons, I like a Stabilizer. Stabilizer's good. I would use this mod if it gave me damage. Ammo drum. Ammo drum would depend on the weapon. For this weapon, I would run an ammo drum. Onyxism is such as no problem, so I don't see a point in talking about mods other than buffing the ones we seldom use. The problem the game is game mechanics themselves are imbalanced for melee. But you can't... Which is why you can go to level cap with a Mark 1 bow, but not even close with any primary. Even the CD starts fading after level 3000s because the mechanics for guns is what is outdated. I think your, like, thoughts on the game are maybe a little outdated. Did you know that there's no rewards for, like, going past, like, a half an hour of gameplay anymore? Actually, an hour. And it's more like an hour. Let's see, what else is, like, a pure... On-hit accuracy, stuff like guided ordnances in that category. Taste mods would reduce the apparent impact of modding beyond just more damage mods, even if they are conditional, meaning less Forma and potatoes and less grind, which is very much not in DE's to-do list. Why would that be less grind? I play for rewards when you play for fun, play for rewards. Heck, imagine... Okay, so it's not fun for me to fight level 3000s because it feels like a huge waste of time. Are we going to argue what's fun? Because that's a waste of everyone's time. DE doesn't design for content that's over an hour of your time in one mission. So, like, why would they... Why? I don't understand. Like, if it's fun for you, please continue doing your thing that is fun, but don't pretend it's relevant. That's kind of ridiculous. What else would you run here? Oh, there's so many mods I haven't thought about in a long time because they're usually just not anything. Less zoom while aim gliding. I actually would use this because I like the less zoom I get from melee weapons. Where does magazine size fit into this new system? I would probably consider that to be a class 2. So I guess on this weapon, I would want to run it in one of these slots. It does theoretically increase damage, but not in any... It's like such a tiny, tiny way. Less grind because less Forma put on weapons as well as less potatoes, which are things... Go back up. Which are things you need to farm as well as the loot cave leveling. A lot of people will not care about taste mods because they're suboptimal and not worth it if it's a number go up mod. If it's not a number go up mod. Well, I think having like 4 mods in your kit being a thing that you would be upgrading is like kind of the thing for that. Like you have 5 mods that are to taste, but like 4 slots would be class 1 modifications like Argon Scope and Bladed Rounds and like Bane mods. And a lot of weapons would probably only start with 2, but then you could upgrade to 2 more. What are the hard set rules for this hypothetical? What are class 1 rules and class 2 rules? Class 1s are basically Like, this is a conditional damage increase, and class 2s are more on, like, the pure, like, customization side. Like, less zoom while aiming, more stable recoil, more ammo in your reserves, more accuracy, stuff like that. There's no conditional minus zoom mod. Where do general damage mods fit? General damage mods fit into the innate system. I think specific numbers like capacity and upgrade cost to be extremely key in here. I don't understand what you're saying. Like, specific numbers like capacity and upgrade cost? The same as now. Including crit and status chance? Yes, I would include both of those as innates. Because otherwise they just take over the entire system. Where to say Blood Rush fit on this system? That would be an innate. Because Blood Rush is like conditional. It's one of those. Just like Condition Overload is conditional. But like, there's a certain level of power where they would have to go into the innates category. Otherwise it's just too good. Blood Rush is conditional, whereas Sacrificial Steel is not. I mean, it's like the lightest form of conditional you could ever possibly have. How many innate slots? 8. So basically, you would have 8 slots for your innates, which don't require weapon level or anything, to allow you to use your weapon at whatever your power level is as the player. People use Blood Rush as if it's just a crit mod. Yeah, because I mean, the condition on it says use your melee weapon. Whereas stuff like Argon Scope is you need a headshot and you have to be ADS, so I think it's more reasonable. Like, I think both of these mods have enough conditions on them where it's like, okay, what am I not running this on? Well, I wouldn't run Bladed Rounds or Argon Scope. Even like the status version of these, I'm not going to run that on an Ogress because I'm not going to be ADS all the time. Who the fuck's going to be ADS all the time? Would you still level up innates like Serration with Endo/credits? Yeah, it would be the same. It would be the same leveling track, but just separating those effects from the modifications. Because like stuff like this where it's like, if you want to use Arrow Periphery, this is fully like there's no like damage benefit to the main stat of this mod, right? There's just not one. Making mods instead of stock. Right, exactly. The innate mods still have drain on the innate modding screen, so you would just have 8 that you can use. So there wouldn't be any drain associated with it because it's not associated with the weapon super directly. VR, literally no one cares about what you're talking about. No one cares about level 3000s here. If anyone is like trying to like come at this from an angle of like giving a fuck about running the same mission for 7 hours, like you can just leave. I super don't care about your opinion. Like straight out. 100% I don't care. Completely irrelevant to this discussion. Like, DE doesn't design for it, so therefore I don't care. I'm guessing Punch Through is innate. Yeah, I would put Punch Through in the innate category. Level 3000 is relatively innate. Condition Overload is what I'm talking about here. You don't even need a damage mod when guns have innate mechanics. Like, yeah, the Condition Overload on the C2 is great. C2 is a really good primary. I don't understand. Sea-Doo is a really good primary. I don't understand what your point is. We need a universal Forma already. I mean, that'd be nice, but probably not going to happen. Okay, regardless, for anyone who's just joining us, to catch up... Oop, whoops, wrong button. To catch up, we talked about... I'll open this first, because if we talked about, like, just doing this in a simple manner, where you take Serration, multi-shot, crit chance, and damage, and status chance, you take that stuff and you just make it innate to the weapon, whether that be through the suggestion that people have said of leveling the weapon and getting all those stats, or making it a separate system on its own where you just get those stats. We already talked about the problem of that being this what-if scenario, where you literally just use all of the tier 2 mods. Where you just use all the mods that are right behind these ones that we all use. You just use the other 8 mods. Like you take the 8 mods, or the 8 to 10 mods that we use right now, and then you're like, oh, those 8 to 10 mods are gone. Okay, I'll use mods 11 through 19. And then we're at the exact same fucking place that we were before. So that doing it really simple like this just doesn't work, because we end up with just power creep and not really solving the problem. With something that's more in this line, where you are splitting things up more cleanly, we'd be at this with this class system though. Why do you say that? Because I don't think we would. Because here's a good example. So the innates, you take Hunter Munitions, you take the like fire rate mods, and then you take your elementals, you take multi-shot, you take damage, you take all the mods that do those effects, and you put them in their own categorization of innates. You level them up the same way, but they're separate from your weapon, and you have them immediately without increasing your capacity. So you can use it in all the content that's super relevant, because your damage increases are separate from leveling the weapon and like customizing the weapon how you want it to be. You take all of those types of effects, and then you could choose 8 of them. So it's basically like modding for the output of the damage of your weapon for like the 90th plus percentile is all on its own. You're doing that stuff still, so those options are still there and available to you. So you're not gonna like take Point Strike and Vital Sense effects on your innates for a weapon that doesn't have crit. You're gonna choose your more status focused stuff instead, and that's gonna be separate. And you're going to be able to do all the different kinds of content that you want to like take your weapon to go and do, while still leveling your weapon, so you're not stuck on like Hydron or ESO or Sanctuary Onslaught or what have you, because your weapon will actually kill things, because those stats are required for you to play at the level that you happen to be at. So once you've leveled your Serration, you have your Serration. You don't need to like wait for your Serration, which is a slog.
Here's my problem, knowing duh. If they implemented this, they'd have to do something stupid like lower the stats considerably, with the failed understanding of we are giving you more mods, so they need to be shittier.
Yeah, okay. We cannot look... Obviously, nothing that we're talking about here is ever going to be implemented, so we don't have to think about how it would be implemented poorly. Let's just assume it would be implemented the right way. There's undoubtedly going to be a meta build with the class 1s and 2s, but the gap in power between those mods and the lower ones is going to be a million times smaller. Right, so in the scenario where we have the rest of this like buffed out, where we have class 1 mods and class 2 mods and slot restrictions on class 1 mods, we get some more interesting stuff going on. So more powerful weapons have more class 1 slots. So as you get into like your Corinth primes, as compared to like your Bratton and stuff, you're going to start with more class 1 slots, because that is, you know, power go up. That's how progression in video game should work. So you have that happen, but you also have an upgrade system to make it so that any weapon you want, if you use new evergreen item number, whatever, you can then upgrade any weapon to have up to 4 total class 1 slots. So you have all weapons be on a consistent basis with that, but with different starting amounts. So you take that, and then the class 1 mods are stuff like Aerial Ace, Argon Scope, Firestorm, Reload Speed, the Bane mods, Spring-Loaded Broadhead, which is an augment for the Daikyu, that is conditional damage. All of these are conditional, and they're more interesting than what we have now. So like Prime Bane of Grenier only works against Grenier. This is the only time you're going to be taking it, is if it works against Grenier. Okay, immediately more interesting than Serration. And then we have, you know, mods like Bladed Rounds. You need to be ADS and you need to get a kill. Obviously, get a kill is not hard, but these are 2 conditions, so pretty good. I'm not going to say that Argon Scope and Bladed Rounds wouldn't be really, really good conditionals to choose for crit weapons, but I don't think that it's a problem because there are 3 conditions: crit weapon, ADS, and on kill. On headshot, like these things have like a long enough list of conditions that I think the powerful effect you get out of them is fully reasonable. There's a reason that these mods used to be meta. They're pretty good, and maybe it's an argument that like the numbers on these should be lowered a little bit if they would remain as class 1 mods, but whatever. Other mods that you'd have in here as conditionals like Firestorm, this is only good on an AoE weapon, right? Like you're not like you can't even put this on a Soma. Duh. And then for an augment like we have on the Soma, where like the per shot crit increase, that's conditional and it's only for the Soma. That's a class 1 mod. You have to upgrade damage critical and so on and so forth once for all weapons, or again and again for each stat per weapon. Once for all weapons. It'd be the same thing, it'd just be a module system of taking out all of those troublesome parts. Biggest problem I still have with you choose 8 of them. Still would not really be a choice. We would almost always still choose Serration, Split Chamber, Point Strike, and Vital Sense for every weapon. The only choice there would be 4 mods of pure damage or damage plus status. And what element we'd pick. Maybe a point system, aka skill tree, 4 innates, where you have to actually choose between putting points and damage, CC, crit damage. Innates would also be a choice. No, I don't. So the reason that you separate this stuff out is because DE is at a stage of the game you can't change it. Right? You can't remove this. You can't. What you can do is move it. Not remove it, but move it. You have to, at this point in the game, you can't just say we're taking Serration out. You can't just say we're just taking heavy caliber and Serration out and you get fucking 330% or whatever it is on all your weapons now. Because if you do that, like I remove Serration and I go, okay, fuck boys. Right? Like, it doesn't change anything. So what you do is you take this system and you just basically make it its own thing. Modding for power is one thing, and you don't need capacity or anything, so you can still just use your weapons wherever you've gotten to as a point as a player. So you take that stuff, and, I mean, it does increase your damage. Sure. It's possible to solve all modding problems. Just make them all scaling. Also makes all weapons viable and all content available in the future. Just make them all scaling doesn't solve this problem. If you make all of these mods scaling, no problem gets solved. We just use these exact same fucking mods. The problem with the modding system is not that we're not strong enough. The problem is that the modding system is stale like 35-month-old bread. This is the build for like 90% plus of primary weapons. And if you narrow that down to primary weapons that are actually worth using, it's basically all of them. For like 1, maybe 2. It's the problem that current modding is not modular. Right, exactly. The builds are stale in most games. I don't understand. How many mods would you say are first pick for the primers? How many are there? We could go through and like actually determine that. It's probably not actually as many as you'd think. This isn't meta. This is just the build. Right, exactly. Would the system be MR restricted, or would you be able to use this from day one with the change to the mod tutorial? Yeah, so you would use it from day one. It would essentially be your innates as a second station, like right here or whatever, which would obviously really conflict with how I've like fashioned my orbiter, but fucking whatever, I would take it. Right here you would have innates, and this over here is your mod station, right? Or you can combine innates into the mod station, whatever is less confusing DE feels. And then you just upgrade them with endo and credits, exactly the same way you do now. And then whenever you go to upgrade a weapon, you have one part of this that is your innates, where it could really honestly be as simple as like this screen being normally just the innates that you're picking, and then having a like slide over where you slide over to your more focused, like actually customizing the weapon modding. Pair of 2 primaries that are worth using have different mods. Means 0 of relevant primaries have the same build since we use like 3 of them. Well. So would ribbons be split up? Like, would there be innate ribbons that also class 1, 2 ribbons? So no. I would like, okay, I know that DE won't fix ribbons, so I would just say they're all class 1 and fucking move on with my life. Like, I would love to sit here and say, oh, I would just remove ribbons, but like obviously D's not gonna do that, so why even bother suggesting it? Just make them all class 1, whatever. Like, it's a problem that we can deal with on another day. Oh yeah, in the best case scenario, you turn ribbons into what they're actually supposed to be. So is it supposed to be like the plexus, but for weapons? We don't really know that much about the plexus, but the answer is maybe. Just remove damage, crit, multi-shot from ribbons and then put them in class 1. Yeah, you could definitely do that. Ribbons changing hands as people with spare platinum from trading. How many people buy plat specifically to buy a ribbon? Obviously, tons. Did you know that the year ribbons were released was like, up to that point, the most profitable year DE ever had? Did you know that? You're right. I was not thinking about creativity. I don't feel I can trust a primary in plus 170 level. Then I'm maybe doing it badly. There's some primaries that you can use at that kind of a level, but I'm not really trying to have a discussion on like if primaries should be better, right? Because this isn't a thing that like just applies to primaries. It also applies to this version of the build, right? Like obviously, secondary weapons, at least this one, very, very good. But we're not really talking about like, oh, changing primary mods to have innates. I'm talking about primaries, secondaries, and melee weapons having innates. It's about making the modding more interesting. It's not about changing the power dynamic. The balance of these weapons is a different thing. Secondaries even have 1 less slot because of lethal torrent. Right. But yeah, I'm not like, I know we're looking at a primary screen obviously, but it's really just to show like the required mods here that we're all very familiar with. Like we can do the same thing like looking at this, and like it's the same either way, right? Like we're just like talking about fulmination instead of firestorm. Share your Reaper Prime build? Yeah, I don't remember what's on here, but sure. Oh, it's just this regular old viral build. Do Warframes have innates, health, armor, shields, energy, sprint speed, etc.? I don't think so. So I thinking about like Warframes, I think that they have interesting enough modding on their own. Because like, if we look at this Protea build, right? This has got a lot of mods that we're like very familiar with. But like if we take this and then look at, oh, I don't know, Equinox, sure. This Equinox build that I'm on, Like, there are some considerable differences here. Like, are there some similar mods being used? Sure. But, like, this is different. Like, Warframes have some pretty considerable differences between them. And where we might see mods like Prime Continuity and stuff used a lot, I don't think it's, like, egregious or anything like that. Not every Warframe follows the same build, like pretty much every weapon. That's right, exactly. Some players are at the skill level that know when they don't need vitality or something. Right, exactly. But there's a lot more of like a play style choice whenever it comes to Warframes, because like you're modding so many different abilities, and that's especially complicated by the helmet system. Yeah, Warframes don't have the build. They lack that. Like, the one place to say that Warframes have the build is whenever you Forma a Warframe and take it back to rank 0, because then you don't have any fucking abilities, right? That's whenever you get the build. But that's alleviated by them making it so that you get ability levels equivalent to your MR. So at MR 10, your Warframe actually starts with all of their abilities unlocked, so you can put real mods into them and be like, oh, I'm actually playing this different Warframe, as opposed to just slapping the Inaros build on every Warframe while you're leveling them. But that's another different issue. Will you be using buffed airburst instead of larva on your Protea? I'll definitely try it out, but I'm not sure. We'll have to see whenever it comes out. It's definitely an interesting option. Yeah, no, this isn't actually something the DES said. It's just a dream. Yeah, no, this is just me talking about like what I would do with these systems.
It's worth noting Warframes, not all though, have different level up bonuses, and their passives.
Yeah. What about companions? I mean, let's be honest, companions are super stale, but no one cares. Right? Like, companions are mega stale, but like no one cares. So I don't think it's an issue that would be worth like messing with. This is probably a question here a lot, but for you personally, who's the next frame up for the rework hammer? It really should be Frost. Why can't Serration-like mods be tied to mastery rank, like MR1 gets all weapons, the equivalent of rank 1 Serrations? It would make going from MR1 to 10 actually feel worthwhile. The same thing with the crit chance and crit damage and status Serration. Would make sense that you're becoming a master of weapons. So I agree and disagree. So for the purposes of like tutorializing the system and getting reminders in there for actually new players, I think it would be smart if for MR1, which you get to on day fucking 1, you have some amount of the system available to you. And then at MR3, a little bit more of it unlocks. And then at MR5, the rest of it unlocks. I wouldn't put it at anything like MR10 or whatever, because you want the player to know about the system, but be able to use it pretty fast. Like, let's not make any bones about it. MR5 is further into the game than we think it is, right? Especially because of the conditions that are set now, where you have to have played for at least 5 days to even be that far. Don't tie it to MR, tie it to quests or star chart completion. Well, so part of the thing that I have in here. Oh, also, the thing when I said whenever I was like unlocking based on MR would be the levels of these things that you can upgrade to. So at MR5, you'd be able to put like Serration to rank 10. But like in here, I have it described like most modules to be earned. However, there would be starter modules, Serration, multi-shot, fire, right? Seem like good starter ones. And then basic elemental modules to be given as an early junction reward. I don't think there's anything that would stop them from it being like, instead of a mod dropping, you have a module that is now unlocked. You defeated Vor. You have the Toxin module now. Awesome. Right? I still think Serration should just be tied to weapon rank. See, now here's... Okay, so we talked about this a bit, but the reason that that's a problem is if you have Serration tied to weapon rank, then you get a useless fucking weapon when you Forma it. You get it to be completely useless. You get a useless piece of shit until it's like at minimum like rank 25. You theory crafting for a YouTube video, or is it just something that you're thinking about? Both? Would you consider making a menu like the focus trees, but for weapons, and use endo that way to level and unlock it? Well, yeah, you definitely would use endo and credits to unlock it. But so here's the dangerous road. So you would want to make it pretty similar to the focus tree, right? Except for you fucking would not make it a tree. This shit right here, having these nodes be connected for a system like this is toxic. Absolutely toxic. You would not want to make them connected. You would just want them to be their own thing. Like, oh, hey, I have Temporal Blast. That's an innate I can turn on of the 8 that I get. And also, you wouldn't want them to be overarching like the Operator is. You want them to be a per weapon basis. Would be more like the PoE gem system then. I mean, those are upgrades that you're putting on like one weapon at a time. Useless weapon after Forma, and also you just slap in the next number go up in the Serration slot. Right, exactly. Formas would be useless for most of the run and would rely on the other methods of leveling it. Right, and you don't. I think one of the problems with the modding system is the way that we level our weapons. Like, I think for a long time it's been really unhealthy that we just go to Hydron or just go to ESO or wherever we go, and then we just use something else and our weapon levels, and eventually it's a weapon we can actually shoot at something and expect it to die. A tree of mods is literally how it was before the mod card system. Right, you don't want a tree of mods. You want a selection of mods. Basically, you want to take all of the guaranteed usage mods in here. The elementals, the multi-shot, the damage, the crit chance, the status chance. You want to take those and give them their own system because it's too late. It's too late to go back and be like, oh, Serration is an innate thing that you get now, and Split Chamber is an innate thing that you get now. And like, so are the crit and like the one status mods. Because now we've entered into this problem where primed shred exists, heavy caliber exists, primed cryo rounds exists. All that stuff exists. So whenever you move that stuff to a new system, you have to account for it. So the only way to really account for it is to add another layer to the modding system. You have to take all of the mistakes of this modding system with all of these types of mods that you're seeing here and give them their own system of innates. So you eliminate two problems at once. By making them innates, you don't need to deal with the capacity affecting the power level of your weapon. So leveling your weapon just means that you're leveling it to be able to customize it further or put more interesting mods into it. Right? So in the what if where you just like remove these super baseline mods, you just get all the tier 2 mods, which we've talked about. About the too late, if nothing would change, would you like to see them add as mods? Like, what about adding mods that are conditionally better than what we simply have right now? CO for melees is a choice, but it is very easy and in some way boring to apply these status effects to enemies. So what about adding a rifle mod that says increases damage by 150% per enemy killed in an X second time span? Right, so you can do things like that, but I think it's important for like there to be a base level, right? Because there's a back and forth. A really good thing here is that if you say increase rifle damage by 150% per enemy killed in an X second time span, the problem is whenever you're at 0 with that, right? Like, is that a weapon that's going to be able to start killing enemies so it can get that bonus, or no? And melee subverts that because of the combo system, because I'm building combo even if the enemy doesn't die. You have to fix the roots before they start tending to the branches. Right. Like, I'm not saying that if you just convert all of the must-use mods into innates, that there will not still be problems to attend to. By this system achieving the same level of power that I have right now in the current system requires 0 Forma, in the new system a max weapon rank because they are innates. Is that a problem? So I don't personally think that that's a problem, because there's still formatting to be done in a more of a what-if scenario, right? And along with that, so whenever we're talking about like the stuff I have here, I have class 1 mods and class 2 mods, where some mods remain mods and class 2 mods are kind of pure utility. So whenever we're looking at this, class 1 mods would have a slot restriction, and they're basically different from innates in that they are more restricted or lower level damage increase type mods. So they do increase your power, but it's either with conditions or at a very low level. So the examples of that are stuff like Argon Scope, Firestorm, Reload Speed mods, and the Bane mods. So if we look at the type of stuff that's in here, we have like, you could take a Primed Bane of Corpus and throw that in here, and you could upgrade from a weapon that, say, starts with 1 class 1 slot. You could upgrade up to 4 class 1 slots. So going in and upgrading your weapon is still a thing from this menu, and you will gain like small pieces of damage as you do that and invest into one specific weapon. But you'll still have 5 slots that are purely for like full-on customization purposes. So like in a maxed out sense, if I'm like, okay, well, I want the most damage possible for this weapon specifically, I'm going to take my Primed Bane mod, I'm going to take Argon Soap, which is like, this is actually 3-way conditional in order for me to get some more critical chance, and Bladed Rounds, which is also 3-way conditional for me to get some more critical damage, which I think are totally reasonable mods to have in slots. And then like damage specifically to Corpus, which is a mod that I would then like switch out with the Bane of Grenier or Bane of Infested or Bane of Corrupted or whatever else. And then I have one more slot that would either be like another pure just like quality of life thing like Ammo Drum or Guided Ordnance or Arrow Periphery or Stabilizer or Hush or whatever else in a bunch of these slots over here to just customize it to be the way that I want it. Then I could also go in here and be like, oh, okay, for this last C1 slot, I'm going to go with Primed Fast Hands. Okay, so now my weapon reloads faster. That's good for me. And this is a DPS increase. But it's on such a small level that, like, I can determine the difference between Primed Fast Hands and, say, like, if I'm using... Oh, let's see. What would be another one that's a close on the level of a Primed Fast Hands? I guess okay, if we had like a Primed Magazine Warp, right? That would be an easy one to say, right? Like Primed Magazine Warp versus Primed Fast Hands. It's like, which one of those is better? Oh, it depends on the weapon and what I want to do. Like, yeah, more uptime versus less downtime is the question. And then it's like, okay, well, wait, if I have Primed Magazine Warp, like, do I need the extra critical damage? What if I just had more bullets? And, like, you start making those kinds of considerations because you want to keep the levels of these closer together. Would you consider only being able to use 4 innates before you install an Orokin reactor? I mean, you could definitely make that restriction. That restriction would probably be pretty smart on DE's part. I don't think that would be outrageous. My issue with Banes is having to switch between every single mission. Right, and so it's like, would Banes be like the largest damage increase you could probably get out of all of the C1s? Probably. But like, if you don't want them, it's a small enough damage difference that you could be like, I don't want to fucking change that every mission, dude. Fucking, let me just go in here. Just give me Bladed Rounds, man. I don't want to switch my mods all the time. These are just like generally fine. They work against all the factions. Like, I think that's perfectly reasonable as well. And it's like, wait, this weapon's AoE. I want to use Prime Firestorm. What if I had just more AoE? Cool. That's more comfortable for me. Like, the difference between, like, Bladed Rounds and Prime Firestorm is really hard to quantify. We start getting down to, like, more mods where it's like, do I switch those out? Yeah, you could also just run multiple Banes. Like, if you're like, oh, the only factions I really care about having that extra damage on are the Grenier and the Corrupted, fucking slap them both in there. And like, and that's like at full upgrades. Like you're still throwing in stuff like Stabilizer, Ammo Drum, Guided Ordnance, Arrow Periphery. Like there's all that kind of stuff. Or all the Banes. Yeah, sure, all 4 of them. Fuck it. Why not? Do it. Like I would not use Argon Scope if it wouldn't put me into another crit range. Sure, right, exactly. Like maybe you're valuing the crit damage. Maybe you don't ADS all the time. Like the weapon you're using is not big on ADSing, so you're not going to get the bonus from Argon Scope. Like you change that. Like there's more options whenever the mods look more like this, and you're like big overhead, like just being able to like do the content type mods, like Serration and Split Chamber and all that business is separated into its own thing. So you can spend more time kind of feeling out what you want to do. ADS is aim down sight, as opposed to just doing what makes the number go really high. Like there's still some aspects of like arguing, right? Because like there's still the aspects of like getting to this menu, and then for like these 4 slots, I can still argue with someone about why I like primed firestorm better than bladed rounds, right? It's like, well, hitting more enemies, if I hit 2 enemies instead of 1 enemy, that's double damage. And then the argument can come back, well, it's like, well, on hard targets, you want critical damage over having the AoE, because on the hard target is the target that matters. You want to kill them so that and you're already killing all of like the light guys. So it's like, well, I'll hit more lightly armored guys and kill all those guys. Like there's a real back and forth to be had on like the cost benefit analysis between those 2 mods. You know where that doesn't exist? Hey, should I use Serration? Yeah, you dumb piece of shit. You should use Serration. Should I use Split Chamber? Duh. Of course, you stupid motherfucker. Of course you use Split Chamber. What's happening? We're talking about changing the modding system to be more interesting. Do weapons need damage? Question mark? I think it would be cool if we could decide how we could change the base weapon stats. We could make the build we want. Like, today I want this weapon but with more crit and base damage, and the next day, well, I want more fire rate and status. No, I think weapons should remain unique. I think that's a modular weapon idea, which we have in the game, right? I mean, that's more so asking for like an expanded modular weapon system for kit guns, and I think that's totally valid. But I wouldn't change like the Exceltra into being like, oh, I can focus on status with this gun, because I think that seems too complex. It sounds great, but I also don't want to use my brain when I play Warframe. I just want to go swoosh swoosh real good. Well, you still have the option to do that, right? You just put in whatever you like on this page, and then on the innates, you choose the gun do damage good. Which mod can I drop? None of them, you idiot. Right, exactly. Basically, on crit weapons, you have 6 to 7 slots full, and 1 to 2 slots are to taste. Yeah. Yeah, one maybe... Oh, 2 is really not even a thing anymore to taste. You basically have 1 slot to taste sometimes, is how it works right now, depending on the weapon type. Might as well just buff all the guns and get rid of those, too. Serration, Hornet Strike, Pressure Point, always take a slot. Yeah, on like the absolute, like... If we're talking about like the galaxy brain, like small brain to big brain scale, like small brain is like, oh, just take Serration and its similar effects and make those innate on the weapon. Like just go whole hog on that bitch. Remove Serration, remove heavy caliber, anything that says plus damage on it, remove it and make Serration innate. You can definitely do that, but the problem with that is that we end up with a situation where we're in this what if scenario, or actually we're not even in that what if scenario, we're in this what if scenario, and it's like, wow, what pog, wow, right? Like this is the small brain, which is not ridiculous. It's not ridiculous to like have that thought, because it's like, yeah, you just remove the problem mod from the scenario, right? Like, the problem mod in the scenario is Serration. It just goes on everything. You put that same exact effect on every single weapon in the game. And it's like, okay, you're right. You're right. However, we're still in the problem zone. So if you don't instead take it and make it its own system, you end up with a problem that, like, webs out and spans, like, 20 to 30 mods. And if you're removing all 20 to 30 of those mods, you kind of remove Warframe from the weapons, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to take the Warframe out of the weapons. You just need to move this no creativity allowed, no arguments allowed. This is what the numbers say, Mason. You need to move this to its own system. Is it melee the exact same situation? Okay, yeah. Just to clarify, this is not a primaries only idea. This is primaries, it's secondaries, and it's melee. The most difficult of which to change is melee, because melee has, I would say, maybe the most mods that are actually kind of interesting, and or are like on a strength level that is strange parity. Yeah, very few taste mods. But on a weapon like, let's say the Reaper Prime, the mods in this weapon that you're looking at are very clearly not to taste, right? Except, is Primed Reach to taste? No, it's clearly damage. Like, clearly, we use it for damage. Is it a class 1 mod? Maybe. But it's probably an innate, right? To be fair, melee has 3 the builds. Right, exactly. You have, like, do I even have them on here? Yeah, this is, like, heavy attack efficiency, etc., etc. I'd go with class 1, like Firestorm. Right, but there's more of an argument to be had in some spots here. Like Blood Rush. Is Blood Rush conditional? Technically. Technically, Blood Rush is conditional, but the condition is just so easy that I would say personally that this should be an innate. I think you'd still run into the issue of most mods being completely pointless / bad. We just get a new class of the build. I think what needs to happen instead of / in addition to this idea is a lot of the mods need to have their effects fused or straight up removed. No, for sure. I absolutely agree with that. I think there's a lot of like there's a for sure like there's a squish that needs to happen in Warframe where like a lot of things get refined and like numbers change in some pretty significant ways. That's like, technically, if you look at a mod like Buzzkill that fucking nobody uses, or even like to a more hilarious degree, Augur Strike, no one uses Augur Strike. But if you take every single mod that says more damage away from me except Augur Strike, I'll put it in my build. So like mods like this should just be like squished out of the game, reworked, or removed. You think about being able to change a Warframe's associated damage or status type to something else with the helmet system? You could, but it seems unnecessary. Nobody uses Augur Strike because Puncture is trash compared to Bleed procs. I mean, that's not the only reason you don't use Augur Strike. It's one of them. Remember all the countless set mods post PoE? I don't. I remember the ones that are good. I remember the Vigilante mods. I remember the Augur mods. Yeah, you get into like a more interesting case here. I think it's still pretty easy to break down melee weapons into their innates. I think it's a lot harder to take like melee mods and like have a meaningful classification like this. Focused defense, parry angle +5. It's like this isn't really a playstyle. It is a strict upgrade, but it's not like, I mean, I'll slot it in if I like don't have enough C1 slots to like, you know what I mean? Like if it's a C2, it's like I guess I'll put it in one of my C2 slots, but is it really doing anything for me? And it's stuff like Life Strike. Like, is Life Strike a C1 or a C2 mod? Like you get some kind of weirder options in here. Like, is Killing Blow a C1 or a C2 mod? It's a heavy attack mod, so it's kind of putting you into that heavy attack zone, but like where do we put these certain different things? And like some of that has to come with the possibility that like there's another option for this kind of overarching stuff here, and it's to go the other way with this, which I think is worse. If you go the other way, what you do is you make all the innates happen and stuff, right? And then you take, grab this, you take C1 mods and C2 mods that I have classified here, where you have like Hush, Terminal Velocity, Ammo Mutation, Stabilizer, Cautious Shot, Ammo Drum, Twitch, etc. The other option is to remove about 90% of the mods that you would consider to be Class 2 that just aren't good enough to ever see use, and them be the mods that are Exilus mods, which a lot of them are already Exilus mods, and you, instead of going on a more heavy C2 side, you go more heavy on the C1 side. So instead of having like 4 absolute maximum C1s, you have like 6 or 8 maximum C1s that you can upgrade into. and you start at like 5 or whatever for a lot of like the higher end weapons. That's the other option for this, but that requires, in order for it to be interesting, it requires them to rework a lot of things. Because in this type of scenario, we would have the situation where stuff like primed fast hands and argon scope and primed firestorm, like firestorm's conditional based on the type of weapon, obviously, but we're going to end up in a situation where obviously everyone just uses primed fast hands, everyone uses argon scope, everyone uses bladed rounds. All that stuff would kind of simplify out. You don't have a limited enough like section of damage increasing mods on a per weapon basis that they can fight each other more effectively. You instead like just are taking out more and more of what would be true customization on a more personal level. Will the idea of innates create a different result than DE just adding another row of mod slots like Necromex? Well, the idea of innates is an outlet. It's an outlet for fixing this problem. Because each of these different things that's in these different mod slots would be its own innate, right? Like Serration is an innate, Split Chamber is an innate, Point Strike, Vital Sense. Those are their own thing. There are 8 different slots that you would use these effects in. They're not your modding system. They're not your actual customization. Heavy Caliber would go in there, so you could still stack Heavy Caliber and Serration, and you could have up to 8 of them, which is basically exactly what we're doing right now. And then you get the problem of if you just remove all of those and make them all innate without doing anything else, you get this what-if scenario where you just put all the other damage mods in that you're not moving. Like, even if you move over the elementals and stuff like you should, you're still going to end up with a situation where, like, it looks like this, right? You're just going to fill it up like the rest of the Banes or whatever, or like primed fast hands and like all the stuff that affects damage very strictly. You're going to fill the whole thing with as many of them as you can get, which is also not what you want. And that's why the other option becomes to have more slot restrictions. Because if you have class 2 restricted slots, that means you have to use class 2 mods, which actually forces you as a player to choose what you like, because none of them are going to affect your damage. Constraints breed creativity. Kind of. Well, it's actually not so much that, like, constraints breed creativity. It's actually kind of number not involved breeds creativity. Like, you can't involve the number with these 5 slots. None of these 5 slots are going to make your number go up. So therefore, no one can tell you what the right mods are for these 5 slots, right? Like, someone could tell you that Stabilizer on the Grakata makes it so much easier to aim. But if without Stabilizer, you're nailing all your headshots anyway, you're like, well, that doesn't have any value to me. I just hit them in the head anyway. I don't need Stabilizer. I'd rather use fucking arrow periphery for less zoom while I'm gliding around and stuff to make it more like the zoom that you get on a melee weapon. Like, more customization, like actual customization stuff. And you can look at a lot of the stuff that's just in the Exila slot right now for what would be a class 2, right? Like Vile Precision, less fire rate, less weapon recoil. Sure, totally an option for this. You look at the melee mod parry and tell people this game has melee counters. I mean, it does have that. Be doing a video on this, correct? I think so. Either that or I'll just upload this stream. Who could say? Yeah, like cautious shot, like making it so I don't stagger from my explosion attacks. Sure, yeah, C2. That I need that. Someone who stays away from their explosions doesn't need this at all. Gun glide, less recoil while you're sliding. Sure, that's to taste. Silent weapon. How many Warframes do you not need a silent weapon as? Most. Is it nice if you're Avara? Absolutely. That's a great thing for Avara to be able to go into. For sure. You play Avara a lot, you're going to love the Hush mod. Projectile speed. I want my bullets to be faster. Is this even relevant on all weapons? No, because some of them don't even have projectile speed. Really useful on mods or on weapons that do have projectile speed. Great. Like, Twitch, holster speed. Do you want to switch between your weapons way faster? Sure, absolutely. Is that going to be important for some people and not others? 100%. Or else just be done Gauss. Causes spatial distortion on your weapons. Yeah. And then, like, rifle ammo mutation. It's like, do I need this on this weapon as compared to someone else needing this? Like, that's, like... Those are, like, actual, like, more reasonable options. These mods actually represent more real options. Yeah, Barrow brought a new prime damage mod. Weapon switching is faster and slower paced looter shooters than Warframe. That's true. The weapon changing speed in Outriders, lightning comparatively. Which is hilarious. Being realistic, the only reason we use Ultra Speed is Profit Taker. Why isn't Twitch an Exilus mod? What a good question. Actually, no, it is. It is an Exilus mod. This is an Exilus mod. Oh, it's just very faint. Kind of blends in, but it is an Exilus mod. Yeah, these are all Exiluses. Yeah, like these mods represent more choice in this slot, and like making more of these would probably be required, as the options here are fairly limited, right? But making us actually use these more fairly limited options that are more in a way that's customization, actual, I think is better than this. Which I know is not a new opinion, and it's definitely better than just like moving all of these up to a higher tier. And then just doing a raw power creep of like, everyone use all the other ones now. But also, I still think it's healthy to take these different upgrades that do increase damage objectively, like Primed Firestorm and Argon Scope and Primed Fast Hands, and giving them a place in the modding system. Because I think that these are, like, you know, these are in contention to be like, oh, okay. If I have class 1 slots, which then class 1s give you a thing to chase as a player, where it's like, oh, I have this weapon that I like the Exceltra, I want it to have all 4 of its possible class 1 slots. Doing that stuff is compelling as like an upgrade path. Because you have your base level, this weapon is usable from innates, and then you have some customization stuff around what you like personally, for like guided ordnance and arrow periphery and ammo drum and stabilizer. And then you also have, well, I still want my number to go up a little bit, with more magazine capacity, better AoE for your explosive weapons, you know, like restricted damage increases and like faster reloads and stuff like that. What do they make the mod slots specific? Like you only got 3 slots for C1s and X slots for C2. Right, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I'm saying that like C1 slots would be like, if you have the Bratton, it has 1 class 1 slot. And, like, the Bratton Prime has 2 class 1 slots by default. But then you can upgrade any weapon up to 4 class 1 slots. Polarities staying the same. Yeah, there's no real need to change polarities out, I don't think. And I think it would be really hard for people to be mad that their polarities got messed up or whatever whenever you're taking the build that they were using and giving it to them on a silver platter, right? Because, like, whenever you're taking all the mods that everyone uses in every single fucking build and you're saying, okay, well, now you just modded a different way, put in the builds that you wanted. I think it'd be very hard to be mad about that. It's like, congratulations, you did invest 3 Forma. Now you can use it for mods that actually give you a level of customization. What about restricting what mandatory mods you should put in? Like, would you want Hell's Chamber or Prime Point Blank if they gave the same percentages? Do you want element plus status chance or a lot of elemental damage? Right. But your innates would be choice driven. You'd have up to 8 innates, 8 mod slots as it stands right now, and you'd be able to mod them the same way. Like all the mods that would become innates, which would be all the multi-shot, all the elementals, all the damage, all the crit mods, and like all like the status type stuff. Like that stuff, you're still choosing between those. What's the solution for mod capacity, assuming we have more slots? So you don't really have more slots. You have the exact same amount of slots here, and innates would not deal with capacity at all. And the reason that innates would not deal with capacity at all is because you would get your innates that inform the amount of damage your guns can do at a base level, just the ability of your weapon to be as strong as it needs to be to do the content that you're doing. And that is innate to the weapon and your upgrades as a player. Once you've upgraded Serration, you can just put that on any weapon at no cost. You still need to pay mod costs? No. You need to pay mod costs for your actual customizations. Oh, you mean for endo and credits? Yeah. You'd still upgrade Serration with endo and credits like you do now, so you have that same level of progression, but your weapon is just also usable while you're leveling it to customize it and add more C1 slots and those lower level upgrades. A system like this would also potentially act as a balance guide for DE themselves as they add new mods. Right. And it also doesn't remove the ability for them to add primed mods. Because, like, if we look over here, if you've got primed... Well, it's in this category. If you've got primed shred, this would be an innate because it contains punch through and fire rate. And you can just have regular shred. And then whenever you would unlock primed shred, you instead get the primed shred module. It's not hard. Literally translates 1 for 1. And any progress you made on regular shred now carries over into primed shred. Because it's just the new module. It's the new, better module. When shred drops normally, what happens? You get the module instead. Because, like, this wouldn't, like, remove the farm for anything that would become a module. It would instead be that you get a base selection of modules, Serration, multi-shot, fire rates, and then you unlock the rest via drops from enemies or other rewards. Like, on this, I have it written out that basic elemental modules would just be an early junction reward. So early on, you'd be able to be like, oh, I have toxin and fire and all this other business that I could choose from. And these, like, lower level, unleveled 90 mods. But then later, you're going to get your, like, dual toxin innates from Vor. Seems like it would help make modding feature-proof for new mods that they add. Right, exactly. It's basically to take, like, some of the mistakes that have happened in the game so far, and then just kind of make it so that they're on their own and no longer mistakes. It just looks like it's its own system that is related to power and a system that is related to customization. Wait, do we have a pack to crack? It's on cooldown. We do have a pack to crack. It was a couple minutes ago. This system apply to sentinels or pets. So I don't think that it would need to apply to sentinels and pets because I don't think it's as, like, vitally important personally that you have, like, a completely unique Pulpophyla or whatever, or like Helios or whatever. I think it just being like, oh no, that's the things that Helios does, I think is fine. I don't think there's any really big problems with that. I do think that the weapons that we use all being the same build becomes like a little rote. And I think that the changes that we're talking about here would make weapons act a lot more like how Warframes are right now, where it's like, well, the Warframes do different things, therefore I mod them differently. These weapons do different things, therefore I mod them differently. Like for the Exceltra, well, I'm using Prime Firestorm, but also Argon Scope, and I want it to reload really fast, and then I have these mods over here, which are like, I don't want to zoom in as much, I want it to be way less recoil, and like, these are things that don't affect damage, but they're changes that I personally want to make to the weapon. Do worry about teaching this to new players, though. The system as is can seem very daunting, and effectively doubling the number of mods you use on a weapon under this new system might be a turnoff. So, I actually think that there's two ways to look at it. There's that, which is like, oh, you're doubling the amount of mods that people are looking at. But there's also, I think, more so what the reality of the situation would be, which is if a player asks you, what should I do with all this shit? You look at them, and you go, oh, don't worry about anything in the modding category. That's just customization. just use your innates. Level all your innates first. And then you have a much smaller pool that a person can focus on. You have a siftable system because they're going to have way fewer innates. It's basically taking what we have now, and instead of a new player going, is Aerial Ace good? It's basically going, no, Aerial Ace isn't required for this. You want Serration. It's an innate. You want your innates. The innates are the really important ones, new player. Innates are the really important shit that you need to focus on. And then later, you have all this other goofy shit. Like, causing a separation there, I think would actually make it more clear. Even though you would technically have more depth, it's more clear depth. I'm sure, but that is more of a band-aid than a fix. Companions should have modding diversity as well. I mean, modding diversity on companions is like most of their abilities and stuff are different. I think I think you would want the modding to be better on like the stuff that you as a player are really using, more so than you would need it for this. When do we get to the level 3000 builds? They are still there. They're still available for people. So your options are the same. It's just more clear and like better. Is X good? If you like it, sure, but focus on innates first. Right, exactly. And that's like very clear advice. Makes sense, but new players would still need to be told / taught to focus only on innates, either through players or the game tutorials. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm gonna put it on like a really, really low difficulty level. Like really low. Like if we can just go below my webcam, I'm gonna put it way down here, like maybe on about my ass level of how difficult it would be to have like Rebecca record a line that says, Tenno, the most important system to your power is innates. We did it. Ladies and gentlemen, we did it. You told the player. Round of applause. There it is. Somewhere during the opening quest, you said that innates are really important. Wow. Orta should say it so it really sticks. Yeah. Or yeah, sure. You could have a really annoying message from Ortis. Like every like 5 times you open this thing right here, Ortis goes, "Operator, have you been working on your innates? This menu is more for customization." You could even have him do the glitchy thing. I can write the Ortis line right now. Operator, are you modifying your weapon? Isn't that a waste of time? Purely for customization?
Base level, or they could bring the modding tutorial and the codex up to speed, and make you look at it when you get to the mod screen for the first time.
Yeah, no new Ortis lines, though. We don't have this. Why not make the modding system not available until MR5 or something like that? No. Holy shit, no. Don't make the modding system available until... Oh, well, okay, I guess if you're saying that, like, the innates are available, the modding system is not. Is that what we're saying? I just want to clarify. Also, Leopard, thank you for the 100 bits. If you mean that, absolutely reasonable. That would actually probably be pretty smart. But also, like, I guess new players have no fucking idea what they're picking up anyway, so it would really just make them focus on what's important. Because, like, if they picked up, like, a Bane of Infested, they'd be like, where'd that go? But, like, that's already their reaction when they pick up Ferrite anyway. Yes, that's what I was going for. Yeah, you could definitely do that. You could definitely, like, lock up the modding screen and have, like, the innates be front and center for the first few MR. We forgot a huge elephant in the room called Ribbons. Where do they stand? You probably just make them class 1 mods and take damage, multi-shot, and crit out of them. That's probably what you do. You take damage, multi-shot, and crit out of them, and you make them class 1. Like, obviously, we can't get to a place where it's like, just remove them, which is what we'd all love. But, you probably have to do something like that. Or you could make them class 1 and not change anything about them. Honestly, like, I don't know. I have no energy to, like, argue that Rivens shouldn't be a thing. Because, like, it's been said. We all know they're bad. You say earlier on make them innate. I mean, you could literally do it anyway. Like, they're poison for the game. I just tuned in and it triggers me so much. You have 2 level 5 ammo drums. Oh, yeah. That was an accidentally. A long time ago. Or they make it easier to get God Rivens and trade lock them? Sure. Rivens are the reason modding will never change. I mean, modding can change, and Rivens can just stay the same. They could just become even more of a blight, but they're already a blight, so, like, honestly, whatever. If the base level modding was better, I could just continue to ignore Rivens, and I guess that'd be fine. Remember the one Riven question during the last dev stream where there was a good idea offered in DU? It was like, no. Yes. Oh, Daft, I'm gonna run out of Coover. I never roll that shit. That's the biggest issue. This undertaking requires effort. I mean, I think that this undertaking obviously would require effort, but I don't think it's as much as you would think. Because mostly what it's doing is you're just taking a subset of the mods out of the system, giving them a new visual look, and giving it its own 8 slots, right? That's what you're really doing. That's like really what like the whole deal becomes. Is that instead of using these 8 slots, these 8 slots are reconfigured for their original purpose, and what we actually use them for now becomes its own system. Are you uploading this to YouTube? Perhaps. It definitely break things, though. I mean, sure. YouTube time. Do it. Aha! Hello. You just use the gold, silver, and bronze since rarity means nothing. I mean, rarity does mean stuff, though. You probably just give them a new look. It could be very simple. This kills build diversity? Wait, hold on. Let me read this again. Also, this kills build diversity when you A, you have all the mandatories as an 8's max, and B, almost every possible quality of life Bane mod is on your build. Less available slots are reduced, whereas right now you have 8 slots where you pick between damage, elements, and quality of life, which breeds more creativity. It builds differentiate between good and not great weapons in the game. But you don't use any of the quality of life mods. I don't understand how this would kill build variety whenever it's making it so that you use more than the 8 to 10 mods that people actually use. I like the tiered concept, and I appreciate how it considers the constraints of implementing a massive change late into the game's life. Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as like just remove all the elementals and damage and multi-shot and make it inherent. It's like that doesn't really work. It's much too late for that. Right now you have to pick between stabilizer and ammo mutation, so pick one, not both. Else you deal less damage. Why would you pick between those? You're picking the Vigilante ammo mutation mod because it literally adds damage. This way you would have some elements of like performance in this section of building, but it's on like a much more minor, much more constrained level that opens up room for creativity on DE's part in order to give you mods that fight for like the power level in this realm, which is much easier than trying to get something to compete with fucking Serration because it's so binary. And then you have 5 slots that are for like true customization type stuff, like Stabilizer. Maybe you have a few slots for scaling mods. I mean, that scaling type stuff would be in the innates. Oh. Yawn.
Shut up and take my money.
What about just straight up more slots? So then you run into the problem of capacity. You run into the capacity
What about
problem.
just straight up more slots?
And let's say, for example, you halved the cost of all the mods and you doubled the slots in the game. You actually end up in this what if scenario where you just add in all the tier 2s. Like all the mods that we like consider running now but don't because we just run this. We're just up here and we're like, oh, okay, we'll just put in heavy caliber and just literally put in put in the other ones. You're like, okay, well yeah, Firestorm goes on this one, I guess. Like this is the top 8 mods, and then this is the next 8 mods, right? If you took into account that you're like halving the cost of all mods and doubling the slots, you really just get the exact same thing. Are there even enough mods on each weapon class for this system to work? Yeah. Yeah, Melee is a little bit sparse with the, like, what would be a Classification 2 mod, but there's room for expansion there. And I think room for expansion is better than no room for creativity. He thinks a graphical guide might be a good idea for explaining this on YouTube. That's fair. That's a tagline right there. That, yeah, well. Would be a better way to differentiate Class 1 and Class 2 into basic mods and Exilus Plus?
Please post this to YouTube. I don't normally tune into streams and I love more long-form content and would enjoy being able to watch and rewatch this kind of content.
That's fair. Yeah, I might just do that. To get back to the thing Boris is saying, is it just semantics, but Exilus is basically what you're describing Class 2 as? Yeah, for the most part, I would say, yeah, Exilus do encompass what I would consider to be a Class 2 modification. Imagine Kuva Twin Stub as classic example of good weapon with bad quality of life. Right now I have 8+1 slots where I pick between the set of mandatories and quality of life. As these problems, shitty reload speed, shitty ammo economy, shitty recoil. In the current system I slap on my mandatories, and in the remaining maybe reload speed or recoil, and run Arcane Pistolier into Carrier. If I have all the slots available for my customization, then every weapon in the game would be amazing. Does that sound like a bad thing? I mean, that just sounds like you used your modding to fix the problems you believe that weapon has. And most of the mods that you described are Class 1 modifications, meaning that you would have to invest in Class 1 slots in order to, like, actually put all those mods that you want in that weapon on that weapon. I think you just described, like, the reason that this It would be the thing. The amount of problems that you can fix should be limited. Well, whenever you're talking about... So here's the thing with that, though, is the problems that you can fix are stuff like... You're talking about, like, magazine warp for, like, magazine capacity, reload speed, and, like, all that kind of business. But then you're overlooking effects like Argon Scope existing.
37, that would be bad because it would make weapons more usable.
Vampire, thank you for the 100 bits. Like, you're overlooking the ability to have other mods like this, where it's like... If you want the reload speed for this particular weapon, but then are you just going to sacrifice your Argon Scope and bladed rounds type abilities? Like you don't want aerial... Well, aerial ace is not a great example in this specific case. Let's see here. Oh, no, I'm still on Exilus. These would be mods that are generally not considered to be Exilus. Are you going to sacrifice, like, your Bane mod and, like, all this other stuff? It's blunt. Make every weapon use every single mod you own. Jesus. For an Argon Scope, class 1, so you'd only have 1 to 2 at base. Yeah, you'd only have 1 to 2 class 1 mods at base. You'd be... in my idea, you'd have the ability to expand with upgrades up to 4 class 1 mods. So you'd start with 2. So if you really need on... your secondary shotguns, like a primed fast hands effect, because you need them to reload faster. It's like, okay, well, you're choosing that as one of your initial 2 class 1s, and it's like, okay, are you gonna not take a Bane because you also need it to have more magazine capacity? Like, it seems like you want the 2 extra slots, but even once you have the 2 extra slots, do you really have everything that you're looking for? And like, what are you sacrificing to get what you're looking for? Like, are you not going for Banes, and instead you are going for, like, the Argon Scope type effect? Like, that's the kind of interesting stuff, right? Like, what other stuff would be considered to be a class 1? Think about the scenario where you've got a mod where it's on headshots, refund 1 round to your magazine or something like that, where it's like, okay, well, that's really competitive against magazine warp if I'm really accurate. But if I'm just spraying, then magazine warp is probably going to be a little bit better. Yeah, not every weapon is going to use stabilizer. You're definitely not going to use arrow periphery on every weapon unless it's it's your personal preference as a player. This is just like a player-to-player difference whether or not you want the zoom while you're aim gliding. On headshots +1 to magazine. On Nell. Yeah, sounds badass. Yeah, and then there's just all this design space that opens up whenever you start talking about effects like that, right? Like whenever if you're DE and you've determined that like class 1 mods work in this way, where it's like you need restrictions such as Argon Scope in order to add these types of effects, this type of stuff. It's like, okay, well, okay, what are we gonna add? Well, let's make a mod that gives you plus 150% critical chance, but only whenever you're sliding and headshotting enemies. But that chance persists for 15 seconds. So you get a longer bonus, and it's just while sliding. So you don't have to zoom in, so you can instead slide towards enemies, and you don't have to be ADS all the time, so you're faster and still can get that crit chance. And it's a little more crit chance to incentivize you to play that way. Like, that's like, okay, do I use that over Argon Scope? Well, no, I don't use that over Argon Scope on this weapon because this is a sniper rifle, so I want to ADS. However, on the Heck, I can use this new mod because I just want to slide into fools and blow their goddamn brains out. Like, that's a good example of like well, this adds damage, but like, I'm really choosing between these types of effects based on the type of weapon that it is. The sliding plus headshot would be ignored since people instinctively go for the path of least resistance. Except for the people that don't. We were talking about making innates have no capacity cost and what motivates me to use a catalyst on my weapons. I'd love a system that didn't require 20 plat for me per weapon, but I don't see DE giving that up so easily. Yeah, so in that realm, we were talking earlier about it probably being So you could have up to 8 innates. It would probably be 4 without a catalyst. That's probably where like the hair gets split there. Is it's like, well, you get 4 innates without a catalyst. And then with a catalyst, you get all 8. That's probably like really where that split happens. Yeah, that's like the like there's a bunch of examples of like that type of effect that we super don't use right now. Like if we go in and we look at Arcane Arachne, whenever you're wall latching, plus 100% damage for 20 seconds. This could be a mod, and it's like, oh, I wall latch all the time. I get this sweet damage bonus when I do, as long as I'm wall latching. Like, obviously, you wouldn't have it be the for 20 seconds part of the effect. You just have it be while wall latching, you get this damage bonus. And it's like, okay, I have to find a wall, latch to it, get my damage in, and like I do better damage when doing that.
People will use it. Funny how that works.
Yeah, it's true. Sorry, thank you for the 100 bits, by the way. Arcane Arachne would be so good if it were like that. Imagine all the Loki builds. I mean, that is what Arcane Arachne does. I'm just saying, like, in these slots, that damage effect can be very competitive. Like, do I want more rounds in the mag before I need to reload? Or do I want it to be whenever I wall latch, I do plus 100% damage? Yeah, and then imagine latching on the planes. That's way less convenient. So based on my environment, I might actually want a different mod. Like, is the wall latch really good in the Profit Taker fight? No. Is it really good when you're fighting Keladathame, maybe? Sure. Energizes existence, ruins half of the arcane diversity. Well, yeah, that's just a problem with the like overarching energy economy of the game. Gotta latch onto the trees, do a tree latch. God damn it. Revert to monkey, return to tree. Yeah, it's just about making the modding system more interesting than it is right now, and using like a more of a breadth of mods, and also opening up design space, because you really give it 3 like areas of attack in terms of design.
Adapathant fun fact: to basically ripped Core's design from the spider frame community concept on the forums.
Nice, Vampire. Look how frames like Hildren and Lavos are breaking out of the energy economy problem. Yeah, that's fair. What do you think of 1, elementals now convert, don't add damage. 2, multi-shot splits damage, doesn't add damage. 3, make elementals and multi-shot class 1 mods and reduce innate slots to 4. 4, nerf enemy health scaling multiplier to make the power level mostly unchanged. You could do that, but I think there's... So, Boris, I think the problem with that list of changes is that it doesn't really change anything. And I think it also crowds, like, what would be your class 1 mods. Like, it crowds your class 1 mods. It doesn't change much in terms of the actual gameplay. And the other thing that it does is it kind of lowers the Timmy factor of the game. And for anyone who doesn't know what a Timmy factor is, it's that part of your brain that goes, ooh, big number. Like, whenever you see someone hit something for, like, 1 billion damage, you go, oh, yeah, that amount of zeros feels good to my monkey brain. Yeah, it's just science. Non-Warframe question, what's the best value on boxes of Strixhaven? That set's not even up for pre-order yet. It's a standard box, so they should be $100 for the draft booster. Number go up, make happy. Yep. Neuron activate. Throw Glaive Prime. Yep. Yeah, like, big number has value. Number big of brain produce happy juice. Yep. I can see that argument. I think the innate slots being 8 is a bit high. Every weapon having fire rate equipped isn't good. End results, in my opinion. Well, that's the thing, right? Is that I don't think that innate slots being innate slots are limited to 8. You don't have 8, if you know what I mean. So like whenever we're doing this conversion that I'm talking about, it's like serration and heavy caliber go into the innate pool. But whenever you're upgrading the weapon, you can choose one of those at a time. Like if you choose heavy caliber and serration, that's 2 of the 8 that you get. And you're choosing between split chambers effect, point strike, vital sense, rhyme rounds, thermite rounds, infected clip, hunter munitions, primed shred. Like you're choosing between all of those different effects still. All of like the primary effects that are like the main shit. Holy fuck, a choice. It's just making the build not have to be the entire build. Right, it's more so like segmenting. And I didn't really touch on this, but like the design space that I'm talking about like increasing is you take the design space that we have right here. And there is a design space right here where you have serration competing against heavy caliber, albeit not very well. And you take all these types of mods where you have this multi-shot, and then you have that multi-shot has to compete against like vigilante armaments or be combined with vigilante armaments, and you have all those types of effects together where it's like, oh, point strike, do I equip that over equipping like more status mods? Does this weapon want that, etc., etc.? You take all those types of effects and you make them their own thing, because we're too far gone, and all those effects need to be made into their own innate system for usability in Warframe on the whole. And then you take 2 more tiers where you have this, where you have C1s and C2s. C2s are raw customization, very personal preference based, and C1s are a thing that you have limited slots of, like 1 to 2 based on weapons, maybe 3 on really high-end weapons or something like that, and upgradable to 4, so you have very conditional damage changes. So like on the condition of the Exceltra, I want more reload speed, or because it's an explosive weapon, I have the option of Prime Firestorm, which is more damage for this type of weapon on a C1 type slot. Argon scope, because this is a crit weapon and I get headshots and I want ADS and all these things conditioned down to being like, this is more damage, but it's more damage tailored to the way I'm playing the weapon or the innate properties of the weapon itself. And then you have these other 5 slots be like, oh, I need more ammo to carry around because this is a very low ammo pool. I want less recoil because this weapon is very recoilless for me. And I want like less zoom while I'm aim gliding because this is a big AoE weapon. I don't need that precision aim. Maybe I just want to see more. And stuff of that nature. So, like, the design space that we're into is, like, pure quality of life mods. Whenever they release them, they have value. Because, like, you can't tell me right now that Ammo Drum has any value in the current modding system. It literally doesn't. It is a valueless mod. But if you have 5 slots that are purely for like how you want to feel out the weapon that don't affect its DPS, Ammo Drum becomes a compelling choice for some weapons. It's like, well, I mean, hey, I've got this Kuva Brahma, and it has really, really restrained ammo that it can carry around. Okay, well, I'll put Ammo Drum on this. I want to carry around some more ammo. I'm also going to put like ammo mutation on this and all that kind of business. Cool. And then like the C1 mods being tailored in, like, this is in a design space where it's like, okay, we can put a lot of restrictions on our players for them to try and get the number, where they have to think about getting the number, right? There's lots of design space for that. And then in the innate space, you have pure power increasing shit. If you want to release prime rhyme rounds, you can do it, and it's going to go into the innates pool, so it's not going to suddenly push out any of like your more interesting mods. It's going to be power go up, number go up, exciting for those types of players whenever you release that through Borrow, and they get their new prime rhyme rounds module to put in, but it's not going to be like, oh, well, no one uses Ammo Drum now, because they're in different places. I also think you're glancing over how difficult it would be to implement this system to melee. Class 2 melee mods don't really exist. I think that's fine. I mean, I said it earlier, and I think, like, so I said it earlier. This is kind of like the real big feeling on it is I think it's fine to have room for expansion as long as there's room for creativity. Because right now, if they gave me a mod that, oh god, what would we choose on Melee that's for this? Perhaps call these innate style and utility. I mean, you could break it down in some way like that if you wanted to. Yeah, lifesteal. Lifesteal is an option. Yeah, lifesteal would be, like, definitely not a benefit to the DPS of the weapon in any way. There's definitely options like that. Shattering Impact is, like, arguable for a style like that. Yeah, like, Melee is definitely the one that's in, like, the most dire need. Like, there's a reason they don't have Exilus mods. Yeah, Healing Return would also be on that side. Yeah, Relentless Combination, sure. Status Duration, arguable. Yeah, Shattering would probably be a class 1. That's probably fair. The parry mods. The one that increases your parry, angle. You could have that one. And, like, there's, like, plenty of things that you can do. Tech Gravity. Slam attacks in a marked zone. Pull all enemies within 15 meters. This is one that would be a C2. Damage on lifted enemies would be a C1. Like, there's definitely things you can put in here. And, like, there's room for expansion in that, like, field.
Shut up and take my money.
RP, thank you very much for the resub. My opinion, the problems with modding and weapons are the same problems the rest of the game has. The code hoarder's house, stacking things on other things ad infinitum. Well, yeah, but that's what this system angles to do, right? Is to take the mess that has created this and boiled the hundreds and hundreds of mods that are in the game down to an 8 to 10 mod system. You take that and you expand it to be a more separated, interesting design space. This change to the system would make weapon mod sets be kind of viable and fun. Yeah, that too. What tier would combo count be in? Combo count would probably become an innate. You'd probably have to have combo count be an innate. We can't use mods that reward stuff like headshots because of issues presented here. Right. Well, you can use mods that reward stuff like headshots, but those would be considered C1 mods. I did not see the Protea Tenogen coming, but that sounds rad. I think combo count could be tier 2. I think things that give you combo count, that make it so your combo count goes up faster, like Relentless. Relentless Combination. This could be a C2, but I think stuff like Drifting Contact, not because of the status chance, but because combo duration is so important to melee weapons on the whole right now, I think that this would be a C1. It's just like how certain things are like kind of hard to classify in terms of the Reaper Prime, or in terms of melee weapons in general, where it's like, is Blood Rush a C1 because it is technically conditional? I would say no. Oh no, I meant mods that add base combo. There's some argument for that. We ranking mods now, just joined. We're talking about making the modding system better by kind of dividing the mods into classes and kind of adding more depth to the way that modding is done, kind of period. I was talking in the context of current modding system with the lack of room we have for mods like that in our current build is all. Ah, yeah. But yeah, initial combo is also like a cornerstone of a heavy attack build too, though. I absolutely adore the idea you're presenting, Zyme. I just think if someone were to go ahead with this, they'd have to apply similar logic to the rest of the game, and at that point, they might as well just make a new game. I don't think that's true, because like the reason I'm presenting this system as I'm presenting it is because of the way that Warframe has progressed up to this point so far. Corrupt Charge would be a C1 mod to me. Stream title napped my attention like a bandit. Nice. You keep the color coding. Innate would be gold. Style silver. Utility bronze. Well, the reason that the color coding is what it is it denotes actual rarity. Removing Warframe stamina didn't stop them from adding it to Railjack and Necromex. Right. And also, like, yeah, that's like on the comments of, like, why not just make a new game? It's like, well, isn't that the same argument that you could apply directly to Necromex and Railjack and all that other business? Our mods being ranked just joined, sorry. Oh, okay, here. We will open up the notes here. So there's some examples on the left here and then kind of a definition of the things on the right. So innates would be mods that you're used to using as basically your literal entire build, like Serration and Split Chamber, Point Strike, and Vital Sense. All those types of mods, including stuff like Heavy Caliber, which are offshoots of Serration and all that. Everything that, like, just raw is just, like, uninteresting damage increases would become innates, and you'd have 8 slots to choose those with, much like you have now, which is all we're doing in the current modding system. But then on a higher level than that, you have C1 and C2 mods. C1 mods are mods that can increase your damage in a more niche or relatively smaller way. That's more interesting and can be argued between. So stuff like Firestorm, Reload Speed, the Bane mods, Argon Scope, Aerial Ace, all that type of stuff being used. And like Spring-Loaded Broadhead and other augments and things as well. All that stuff would be C1 mods. And then C2 mods would be things that don't affect DPS, such as like Hush, Terminal Velocity, the Mutation mods, Stabilizer, Cautious Shots, Ammo Drums, the Twitch mod, all that type of business. And the way that this would be split up is that Class 1s would have restrictions, so you'd start with a weapon that has like 1 or 2 Class 1 slots. So like the example is the regular Bratton has 1, and the Bratton Prime has 2 of them, and so on and so forth. And that would be up to a limit of 4, which you can also upgrade a weapon into. So if your weapon doesn't have 4 Class 1 slots, you can upgrade it to that via an item that they would introduce that doesn't need to be named here. That stuff would then allow you to have 3 subsets of mods, basically. Oh, Vampire, 1 second.
Advergamma37, please try to add to the conversation rather than be a cynic.
Okay. Anyway, and then, so in here, these would be innates, and then if you change that stuff the way that I've described, you get more of a system that would look more like this, where there's a lot of arguments. So, like, Argon Scope, I need a crit weapon, I need headshots, and I need to be ADSing with my weapon in order to get the benefits of this mod, right? Some relatively easy conditions to fill, but still very conditional for the damage output that I'm getting. Primed Firestorm, this is limited to only AoE weapons, so obviously it is limited in that way. And also, not all AoE weapons would even necessarily want an increased blast radius if they can focus on other things. And then Primed Fast Hands for more reload speed. Magazine warp for more magazine capacity. In the example that we've talked about, there would be like a primed magazine warp, and then you're deciding between, do I want to reload faster or do I want more magazine capacity? Which one is better for this specific weapon? Do I want both of them? Etc., etc. All those things are important. And then you also have like the Banes to take into the equation, where it's like, well, am I going against Corrupted? Is that going to be better than Argon Scope? Do I want to bring in like Bladed Rounds? Is Bladed Rounds with its extra critical damage on kill going to be better than Primed Firestorm? Am I going to be hitting more enemies with Primed Firestorm, or am I going to be focusing on like one single harder target? The Class 1 mods, that type of situation, would be much more arguable and situational between each other based on both what weapon you're using and what situation your weapon happens to be in. There's much more of an interesting dynamic of these mods than you're going to get with this, well, the mods that have been classified into like the innates. And then these other 5 slots would be Class 2 mods. Class 2 mods are stuff like Stabilizer, where it's like, I just want my weapon to be less recoil. That's easier for me. That's more of the feel of the weapon that I want. Arrow Periphery, less zoom while you're aim gliding. More accuracy when ADSing on hit. Ammo Drum for carrying around more ammo for this specific weapon. Some weapons might need that, some weapons don't. Stuff that's very much to taste in terms of what you're going to be bringing. And a lot of the C2 mods can pretty much just be described as mods that are already Exilus mobs right now. Exilus mods, rather, right now. Like, if you want more zoom, that's definitely one of these kinds of things. Like, you want more zoom on this sniper rifle? For sure. So you get all the current depth that we have from innates, because those are your big overarching damage increasing mods. You get some of the more interesting, more like situational based damage increases possible with either like 1 through 4 of your possible Class 1 mods, and then your Class 2 mods make up your like self personalization. Sounds like the C2 mods are Exilus mods, and C1 mods are weapon arcanes, kind of. Yeah, all this really does is it takes what's good about the modding system right now and preserves it, and also applies that to making it so that we don't need to like go into loot caves to like hydron our shit up and all that business, because that wouldn't be related to capacity in any way. And also gives us still a like go-to goal for really maxing out our weapons via the C1 mods, and the C2 mods are that like big complications. Actually, weapon arcanes does sound kind of like this. I mean, that's like a lot of what these types of things are. Like, Argon Scope is a very arcane-like effect. Arcane slots that you can unlock. We already have a bunch of arcanes that you could put on your Warframe that, like, apply to your primary and secondary weapons and stuff. There's definitely the possibility that you could take those arcanes and convert them to be mods that can compete in the C1 space. And I think that's definitely, like, a valid like area of expansion, but that's not really what I'm talking about. No, like your innates would be arcanes. Your innates would be another 8 slots. That's basically going to take all these types of effects and put them into those 8 slots. What's the rundown on your modding fixes? No damage mods. No damage mods, but you're converting the damage mods into innates. So you take Serration, this plus 165% damage, and it becomes a module that is an innate that you level once, just like how you do now, and then it's usable on all of your primary weapons. And you get it without capacity up to 8 innates. So you basically have 8 innate modding slots, and all of the really like uninteresting, very easy decisions to make, such as whether or not you should be using heavy caliber or Serration or split chamber or point strike or vital sense or rhyme rounds or infected clip or hunter munitions, and all that, like, really, like, all the shit that's like, oh yeah, the regular primary build, all the stuff that makes those up, you take those and you make them innates to still be able to expand that space in terms of player choice. But then you take the mods that are used much less and are sometimes regarded as like being in that tier 2 subset of what we would use in the case where we don't have this stuff. And if you don't put any restrictions on it, you get a situation where like builds just look like all the conditional mods that are decent at once, and you really still lack that like deeper layer of customization. Like you get people just like, oh yeah, throw all the Bane mods in, put Shred in if that's not considered for the thing, put heavy caliber, etc., etc. But if you classify them and you have between 1 and 4 C1 mods, which would be stuff like Argon Scope or Firestorm or Fast Hands or Magazine Warp, things that affect your DPS but in more minor, quantifiable, arguable ways, depending on your like what you're fighting or where you're fighting or etc., etc. All that stuff is still like an interesting battle between these on like whether or not you should be using Argon Scope or Prime Firestorm, or if bladed rounds should be in here. There's that small subset that are an argument for people to have in a real way and increase their damage further past their innates. But also, you have 5 slots that are just for stuff that right now would be considered to be Exilus, which are really your like true customization points, where it's all what you want to do. What are we talking about in chat? Just got here. Are you saying we should have an extra page for basic mods like ammo, stretch, fast hands? Not stretch. I would not change Warframe.
At blob_, I disagree. The best options aren't between differences in scale, rather between differences in kind.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't change Warframe
Shut
modding
up
because
and
I
take
think
my
Warframe
money.
modding is already interesting. But I would change weapon modding. Also, Knight, thank you very much for the resub. And Vampire, thank you for the 100 bits. Discussion is based on weapons, correct? Warframe mods and builds can be varied because of how different frames need different range, strength, etc. I don't know how they could do it, but adding similar things to weapons could be how they do it. I mean, there's no real way to add enough depth to like a gun as compared to like a Warframe's kit. That kind of depth just doesn't really exist, which is why you would need more options like this. About how lifesteal is either good or bad for gaming, that literally entirely depends on design. One more point in favor of class elementals being class 1 conversions instead of innate. Elementals also serve a large purpose as customization. You're picking the right tool for the job.
Shut up and
Pick
take
different
my
elementals
money.
for different situations. To me, that sounds more like a class 1 mod than the raw number group of innates.
Love the Steam's less than 3.
Side, thank you for 3 sub. From the raw number group of innates, having elementals be both customization and power makes innates more complex than they should be. I don't think it makes innates more complex than they should be. I think it puts like the exact right amount, because like you still have like the innate customization of whether or not you should be bringing 60/60s or like 90% elemental choices and stuff like that. And like Hunter Munitions doesn't belong on absolutely every primary in the game, so you're still gonna have to make choices in your innates, and it would be on a per weapon basis. I think it's like exactly the right amount of complexity in innates. Like elementals are so important to the game that if we go into this scenario, it's like, okay, should I be using the element that's good against my enemies, or should I be using Argon Scope and Bladed Rounds? And it's like 100% of the time, I'm going to slap 3 elementals in here. I need more mod choices for that to mean anything. Otherwise, everyone will just use reload speed, mag size, AoE size, etc. Everyone will just have its weaknesses shored up until you take whatever has the best innate aspects, like having innate corrosive / viral. You have, okay, but that's the thing though, right? Is like, sure, I think room for expansion is better than no room for anything. Like there's no room for anything in a system where this is. But I could definitely see a world where it's like, if you don't believe that there's enough options in these types of things, where it's like we have Argon Scope, Bladed Rounds, Primed Firestorm, Primed Fast Hands, Magazine Warp, and like options like that. If you don't believe there are enough options, that's fine. Adding options is definitely a thing, right? That's absolutely super a thing. But right now, there's no room to add effects that are like Argon Scope or anything, because a long time ago, we used to use Argon Scope. It was a meta mod, and so was Bladed Rounds and all that business. But now, fuck that shit. We just use the same build on everything. Yeah, like, I'm not saying that this, like, suddenly makes everything, like, the best ever. Like, obviously, you would want more mods that fit into, like, the X-List type scenario, where, like, you have more, like, raw customization stuff. Like, do I want agile aim? Like, there's more options than that would be cool, too. What about mods that aren't good enough to be innate mods, such as Hammershot? See, I think that, so, mods like Hammershot, you would make those innate mods, but those would be things that are like, they're up for buffs, right? It's like, that's an innate that you collect, but is not optimal, but that's still in like the raw damage consideration category. Because if they ever release primed Hammershot, guess what happens? Oh shit. You'd want significantly more conditional mods. Right, but I think conditional mods is a really interesting design space, right? Do us a favor, build a weapon out that's not the big mod, see how it would perform in a test. It performs absolutely dog shit. I don't have to do that to know. If I take this Exceltra and I bring this into a test, it will barely hurt them. That's the answer to the question. Hammershot is useless and it sells for 60 platinum. You're welcome. Get to sell. Like, is it really 60 fucking platinum? Jesus. Conditional mods are kind of like weapon perks in Destiny. It's true. I mean, that's like, it's not like copying Destiny or something though, because that's just a video game thing to have conditional damage increases. Do we need to add more unique mods that can synergize with certain kinds of weapons, stuff like homing bullets, bullet chaining, bonus effect from statuses, etc.? For sure. And I think that design space is like good to be explored. But as it stands right now, if they added a mod that said your bullet will bounce to one more target, what the fuck are you removing from this build to try that out? 100 munitions, good luck with armor. Heat. I mean, that's a really good status effect. Probably wouldn't want to be without it. Like how, like that mod is like objectively interesting, giving you like a chaining targets mod. And in this system, it's like, I mean, but in this one, it's like, oh, interesting, chaining targets. Well, I'll remove my reload speed and I'll put it at this, put it on Exilus. That thing that definitely increases damage is going to go on the Exilus. It's going to compete with Stabilizer and Agile Aim and Eagle Eye and Guided Ordnance. I think there's a really significant difference between those different mods. Technically, split chambers is just multi-shot with a twist. You know, you're fair for that. You're limited by the 8 slots. I mean, you're limited by the 8 slots, and you're also limited in that you're only adding these types of effects. Like, you're not at, like, so the reason they made Exilus mods is to try and get real modding into the system. Right? Like, Exilus mods are theoretically interesting. Now, we all just use Vigilante supplies because this makes it so that our weapons crit bitter and also never run out of ammo. And this weapon should not be an Exilus mod. Just putting that out there.
Shut up and take my money.
But this weapon's also in limbo because it adds damage in the Exilus slot. It's like the only one that does. But there's only one Exilus slot. Therefore, all other Exilus mods are useless? Also, Trigger, thank you for the sub. Much appreciated. Basically no room for Exilus except on Kuva weapons. Or on weapons that you want to Forma to fucking death. They made it expensive and then they created a best Exilus mod? Yeah. Weapon Exilus really needs to expand a little, at least a little bit, to let in things like reload speed or magazine size. Reload speed is strictly DPS, though. So is magazine size. 6 or 7 Forma for every weapon with no polarities. Let's go. Yeah, no. Current modding Serration should be free at rank 0. I mean, with current modding, Serration and all the other required mods should be their own thing, which is what I'm saying. Yeah, put magazine size on the Exurgis or the Tigris and tell me it's not a DPS upgrade? Right, exactly. Anything else on the to-do list for today, or is it just a discussion stream? I'm fine with either. We might do some Genshin stuff later on. I'm saying just uber minor tweaks to the current system. I think uber minor tweaks to the current system are like, sure, you can, but I think there's like a wider overhaul that would benefit Warframe more. Obviously, none of this is going to happen. Like kind of an argument for primaries, but secondaries are a joke. I mean, they're both a joke. Like, it's not any more creative on either end, right? Like, this is just the secondary build. Give or take a suppress, because I think I was using this on Avara. To be fair, mods are also complex to for new players, and making it more complex could be an issue. So, okay, so I talked about this earlier, and then someone brought up a really good point. If you actually divide the system into like innates, which are like rhyme round, split chamber, serration, etc., all the things that actually increase your damage, and you consider those to be innate, there's two things that happen. One, the easy advice for any new player becomes focus on your innates. Those are the good ones, right? Which really narrows down what a new player has to focus on. It takes so much chaff out of the situation at absolute baseline. But also, you can have a player start the game without modding and just with innates, which really focuses down the system into what's really important. And then later at like some MR, like MR 3, 4, or 5 maybe, it opens up the modding system for them. There's actually like a lot of elements of splitting this up that would then teach a new player the important bit first by focusing them on it. Can we take the complexity as interesting and adds meaningful depth and old yeller it? This is reducing complexity. Explain it like that, it definitely makes sense. I just remember how I started and I was completely overwhelmed at the start. Yeah, absolutely. Well, because you were overwhelmed. Here. You were overwhelmed because you opened this shit up and you were like, what the fuck is this? Here, hold on, one sec. We'll do by recent because this is usually what it is. Okay, what is Shredder? Is this good? Is this good? What's this? Is this good? What's this do? Is this good? Like, you just looked at everything and were like, I don't know what is this stance? I don't know what that mean. What does that mean? Like, you looked at this menu and just saw a bunch of shit that didn't make any fucking sense. Like, that's like the opening of the game for like anybody. It's hilarious to watch new people play the game because they unlock the modding station, they open it up and they go, I'm not gonna look at that until later. Fuck that shit. But if you instead opened this up and you had to look at the innates that are baseline, which is just the serration effects, the multi-shot effects, and the fire rate effects, like the very baseline ones, like not shred or anything like that, just super baseline. There's damage go up, there's multi-shot go up, and there's fire rate go up. These are your innates that you have currently, and you'd get more innates. You get like your elemental innates on a junction. Like, you can upgrade these. Now you have elements. That's really basic. And it's a lot, it makes a lot more sense than like Flechette, like fucking plus 5% punk. Okay, what's puncture? What does that mean? IPS mods would have to be an 8 too, since Slash is still OP. I mean, IPS mods would theoretically have to be an 8. Those are one of the ones that would need to go through some drastic number changes to be like valid. By the way, is that idea yours or by somebody in the community? This is one that I've been thinking about for a while, but I recently expanded it out into like being more about like the class 1 and class 2 modifications and stuff, and like splitting into innates and stuff. Originally, the idea was just taking the like, you know, serration, split chamber, crit stats, and all that stuff and splitting it out. But that's like literally what this node is just like, oh wait, right. The consequences of doing this the simple way are that we end up with all of the same fucking problems again. I mean, if the tutorial explained IPS elements and revised damage system in a systematic way that improves the new player experience, they will not do that. See, that's the problem with saying that, is that like you can do that, but that ends up being one of two things. That ends up being math class and boring, or it ends up being daunting and people quit immediately. And then there's like the very small percentage of people that go, what the fuck is all this? I have to figure it out. Which is definitely some of us. I guess it can go 3 ways, but that third one I would say is more rare. Oh, I quit the first time purely due to the mod systems. Right, exactly. They leave the mod explanation to us. Yeah, like the full explanation is like, it's not going to go away that like players explain the game to the new players, right? But making it more pointed and just being like, new player, focus on your innates, level those up, really gives it a very easy, understandable player-to-player thing where I can be like, level your innates up, you'll be fine. Oh, good. Nice, Julian. Thank you. Like, focus on the star chart? Yeah. Do your junctions, level your innates, you can farm Rhino on Venus. Boom. 3 bullet points. Wow. The very simple, super understandable, right? He should split Warframe into several different games. It obviously wants to be. Definitely would fail if it did that. This game is shit at explaining anything. Absolutely. I think this new mod system offers a lot of creativity. Shame it's just going to be a dream. Oh yeah, no, it will never happen. We're just talking about it because I think it's interesting, like, to discuss it from a design point of view. Where it's like, the current mod system is not like, it's not like a failure, right? I think it would be wrong to say that, like, the mod system as we have it now in Warframe is like a failure, because, like, you do mod your weapons and it is a progression of power, and like there are elements of it that are like, oh yeah, this is, yeah, okay, sure, right? Like, the problems with it really boil down to it all running together and just all being the same. So all that we're talking about really with reworking it is like sectioning stuff off that's in it into different layers and letting those layers be their own thing. Because right now, we're only experiencing the top layer of what could otherwise be a much more interesting system, and one that's also more friendly to what players want to do with it. What is one thing you really like about the current modding system? Number go up.
Shut up and take my money.
Also, Scotty, thank you for the resub. Much appreciated. Fucking 49 months, dude. I feel like it'll happen in most situations or alternate versions. Always be people, excuse me, who will do the math and only use the 100% most optimal setup. I mean, like, right, but that's, okay. So here's the part where, like, the math gets muddled, right? And this is the part, so there's a wall to be broken down in any community where you go, it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't fucking matter. It does not fucking matter at all. Because, like, right here, what's the difference between using these mods and not? The difference between using these mods and not is I can kill the enemies, or I can't, or slash it takes fucking ages.
If they asked you to join their team, would you?
Oh yeah, I would probably join a team on DE. That sounds cool. I'd probably do that. Like, the difference here is, like, whether or not you can fight the enemies and kill the enemies, right? That's, like, what the difference here is. If you have all of these become innate, and then you look at a build like this, and you go, okay, let's look at the cost-benefit analysis between bladed rounds and primed firestorm on this specific weapon, right? The primed firestorm on the Exceltra offers me a plus 66% blast radius. Okay, you following me? So that plus 66% blast radius is pretty large. That means whenever I'm shooting enemies, I'm going to, on average, hit more enemies because more AoE. Very, very simple to do. So how much damage am I gaining? Well, in large groups of enemies, I'm gaining a very large amount of damage, but I'm going to lose out on any amount of damage I could gain in this slot by instead using this slot for a Bane mod in order to kill higher value targets that are harder, such as like a heavy gunner that's a very high level or what have you. When as compared to bladed rounds, this is going to be on kill. I'm going to get 120% extra critical damage. So on those harder targets, if I'm able to kill the weak targets around them with the AoE that I already have, this extra critical damage is going to allow me to really easily blow through those harder targets and really not have to spend much time on them at all. Is that time saved going to allow me to get to more smaller targets faster, or am I better off with a larger amount of AoE and just focusing on my harder targets for longer amounts of time? There's math to do in there, but the difference between those two upgrades is like really, really fucking like holy shit, like mostly a choice. Like the difference is like what's the difference between adding primed firestorm and serration? Herder add serration, Dumbo. The difference between these is like, oh, also I have to be ADS with bladed rounds. So I can't just be firing willy-nilly. So if I'm just going to be flying through the air and firing out my shots, then Prime Firestorm is going to be better in that situation. Like, all that stuff matters. Or just have a gun for high health targets and one for AoE. Sure, that's also totally valid, but that means that that's changing the descriptor on what you're doing. Because like if I'm using this specific weapon for AoE, or if I'm deciding that this is for harder targets, that means my other weapon might go in a different direction. And that's immediately more interesting choices than what we're doing now. Or putting in a weapon swap speed mod, or switching to a single target weapon and finishing the heavy. Right, exactly. I think the more you build things into the weapon, the less interesting you can get with your builds. From Arcanes to Chroma, many of the must mods have alternate ways to get them. You can put something more interesting, like Primed Firestorm, perhaps, in that newly freed slot. Innates would dumb that down, I feel. Why would Innates dumb that down? I don't understand. Because so the thing about innates, if you're just joining us, innates would be limited to 8 slots, and it's converting all of those required type mods already, right? So split chamber, serration, heavy caliber, all the elemental mods, all that stuff. You're only allowed to have 8 of them. So in a situation where you're optimizing for chroma, you would remove the innate that you're using for the serration effect, and instead take another elemental or take like vigilante armaments' innate effect and stuff like that.
It isn't a choice. The best decisions are between how things feel rather than whether or not number go up.
Right, and I think that's the consideration, right? Is you need some amount of number go up in the modding system, period, to interest certain types of players, but that would be limited to like between 1 to 4 slots. Yeah, on like a chroma situation though, you're taking like, imagine this is like your innates menu. You're like, okay, well this is the menu of innates. On this specific chroma build, I value this because I don't need this effect, because chroma can provide this effect. You're still getting that exact same amount of depth, but then on your actual weapon, you have these more optional situational mods per like increasing your damage in smaller ways or ways that are more situational. And then you have the other 5 mods be your C2 type mods, which are basically just X-lisses that are adjusting the way your weapon feels for you personally. Gonna go up on YouTube? Probably. Okay, I came here halfway through and misunderstood your innate system. Please go through it again, please. Sure. Okay. Just to go through this one more time. So basically, you're right. Thank you very much for the resub. You take serration. You take all of like the mods that you would be in like a raw, just damage increasing, uninteresting type stuff. Where you take serration, heavy caliber, split chamber, point strike, vital sense, all the elemental mods in all their formats, all that stuff like hunter munitions, all that business, including like amalgam serration. And you make it an innate system, which is 8 slots that you're customizing those with. So the exact same design space that we're working with right now, which is just optimizing our damage output, is preserved in its entirety. And it's just its own 8 slots that don't deal with capacity at all, so they're always effective once you've leveled those different things. So if you get like the Exceltra brand new rank 0, your innates will still work on it, so you can use it in whatever content you happen to be doing. And the mod system becomes actually modding, right? So whenever you get into that, there's a division that needs to be made, because in the what if scenario where you remove all of what would be the things that get converted into innates, you end up in a situation where you just like dump in whatever's left, right? Like if they don't convert Firestorm, that goes on. If they don't convert the Banes, that goes on. Bladed rounds, Argon Scope, etc., etc. You just put all the things in that are left that increase damage. Those all just get slapped into a system. But I personally feel like there's some value in mods like Argon Scope and Bladed rounds that are very conditional. So this would split them up into classifications. So class 1 mods are restricted between 1 to 4 slots. Your weapon will start with either 1 or 2. So like the example is the Bratton has 1, the Bratton Prime has 2 to start with. And these mods increase your power, but
In
are
today's
at lower
instance,
levels.
Brozime completely breaks apart the core game and makes it arguably more interesting / better. Got my attention.
Nice, Twilight. Thank you for the 300 bits. And this would increase your weapon's power at lower levels than innates, or circumstantially increasing your power level. And then this also opens up the possibility of adding another evergreen item that can increase the amount of class 1 slots you get up to a maximum of 4. The reason for this is because class 2 mods are basically like expanding Exilises. So you get builds that would more so look like this, where you have your class 1 up to 4 slots here. So you have Bladed Rounds and Argon Scope, which are critical only. They need headshots or kills, and you have to be ADS in order to be getting their different effects. You have stuff like Primed Fast Hands, which is like an argument mod, whether or not your weapon even needs the reload speed if it's already super fast and stuff like that. This is a DPS increasing mod. And then Primed Firestorm is limited to only explosive weapons, which puts it in kind of a unique position. So you have that type of stuff. And then you also are like, arguing with these in like also having like the different banes, because like if you're against Corrupted, then you probably want a bane. But like there's all the different factors that put these into different takes here. I take it Rivens would be innates. I'll be honest with you. In thinking about this system, I don't really give a shit about Rivens. Rivens are a blight on Warframe as a whole. They could be C1s or innates or whatever. I really could not possibly care less. Whatever makes DE more money, I guess, because that's just... they're trash as it stands right now. So, whatever. Not really super important to the discussion overall, I think, because I think they're just a blight in general. But so you take that where like you have more interesting arguments, like I just went over with like Bladed Rounds versus Firestorm in terms of what you're using on any given weapon. And then you also have these other 5 slots that are basically 5 Exilis slots, right? Realistically, because you'd still have to like unlock 1 slot. These 4 slots would be like the Exilis you get, and you can get 1 more and all that business. But basically, you have stuff like Eagle Eye. You want more zoom? Here's more zoom. Agile Aim, more movement speed while you're ADS. Stabilizer, does your weapon have a lot of recoil and you don't like it? You lower the recoil on the weapon. Make it easier and more comfortable for you to use. Guided Ordnance, on hit, get more accuracy when you're ADSing. Ammo Drum, carry around more ammo. This doesn't increase your DPS at all. It just like increases like, if you feel like you need to carry around more ammo. Ammo mutations, like less zoom while you're aim gliding. All this stuff that's like really like custom to you and it's not going to affect your DPS. Basically just quality of life stuff in that category. Right. So what this opens us up to do is that in our innates section, there's still the open design space, right? If DE wants to add primed rhyme rounds to borrow, instead of getting a mod, we just get a primed module. And then that goes into the module system and becomes an upgrade to rhyme rounds. Now you have primed rhyme rounds. Congratulations. That design space is still totally open in terms of increasing the DPS that you're doing as a player and that core experience that we all have right now. But we're also opening up the design space for up to 4 conditional playstyle informed damage mods, which are, I think, kind of objectively more interesting than just Serration and stuff like that, because it makes you think certain ways and like play certain ways and do certain things to get the most out of your weapon and the way you've modded it. And then 5 2-taste slots. Like with these slots, it's like I get to customize it the way I want it, but there's still some arguments to be had in terms of increasing my DPS on the low end. What unholy stats would a prime dual stat have? Hilariously outrageous stats. Would you consider Reach / Primed Reach to be an innate? I would probably personally have to classify Reach as an innate. Yeah. So that is actually the place where this gets more difficult, is that in terms of like classification 2 mods, Melee's really limited in it. But the thing that I keep kind of going back to and saying is that yes, it's really limited to have, like, there's a very, very small amount of class 2 mods for Melee. There's a lot of innates, and there's a good chunk of class 1s. There's very few class 2s, but it's better to have an open design expansion space to expand into and put new things in than to have absolutely no space for new things that aren't just stronger than what you have already. What's the point in increasing your damage? There's basically nothing in the game which really needs the amount of damage we're capable of. This game is a power fantasy. People like to see the number go really high. If you're considered going into game design, I'd love to see a Broframe game exist. So before I got into YouTubing and stuff, I actually was like taking programming classes and stuff. So probably not ever going to actually happen. But before this awesome shit worked out, that was like one of the strats. Yeah, all the new glaive mods would be usable with this system. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, the glaives would probably get the most out of it. They have a lot of like what would be considered a C2 mod. The point is that the game's power balance is so out the window at this point that it's not possible to make fun, difficult content, which hurts the game overall. I think it's absolutely false that you can't make fun, difficult content. The difficulty in Warframe has never really been the enemies. The difficulty in Warframe has always been like puzzles. Oh, thank you, Disaster. I'm glad I could inspire you. Also, difficult does not equal fun. Yeah, that's also extremely true. Like, I mean, you have to think about what, like, the player base of Warframe wants, right? Please remember that Orokin Spy on Lua was taken out of sorties because it was too hard. Okay? Just please try to remember. Like, please remember that Warframe is a casual game. What? Yeah. Yes. They did that. It's fun, though. Yeah, it's one of my favorite missions in the game. I fucking love that mission, but it is too difficult for the regular sortie goers. Not that hard, just too long to complete. That mission is super fucking short if you know what you're doing. Lewis spies and then just take limbo and run. I mean, you could just also just run through it. It's obtuse, not long or hard. It's a puzzle. Disruption was difficult. I loved it. Lewis Spies, some of the best in the game, but yeah, the sortie thing. Orphix Venom as well. Don't know about difficult, but a change. Yeah, I think, yeah, Orphix Venom, Disruption, fantastic game modes. Also, the people in this chat are more hardcore than normal Warframe player. Yeah, if you're around for the changing the modding system to be like more complex and matter in like more of a design space realm, guess what? You're not a casual, probably. You're probably not just casualing it up. Like, I'm just going to point it out here. It is currently, this is a Monday. If this is what you have chosen to do with your Monday night, you might care about game design a little bit more than most people. What do you mean? My 3,000 hours are casual? Yeah. Let's check the patch notes. He claims they removed Lewis Spy due to a loading time issue on min-spec machines. Big doubt. Doesn't seem right to me. I'm just casually watching. You can't just call us out like that. Like to listen to your opinion as you're pretty knowledgeable. Oh, thank you, Apollo. Oh shit, I guess I've graduated from normie casual finally. Nice. You can care about game design and still be casual, for sure. But like generally those two things don't coincide. It's not fair, bros. We can't be targeted like this. Oh, thank God. I thought I was the only one that plays games here. Nice. More people would talk about game design, and there's a lot Warframe does so well. But it also goes to the very bad stuff. Yeah, because, like, you know the other... Okay. I literally fucking always come back to this. The market. The market does such a, like, weird, bad job of, like, telling you what's what. And, like, it's gotten better. It used to be so much worse than this. And in most games, you wouldn't criticize the market. But from a design perspective, it's like, how are you getting people to buy this shit? Like, you open this, and you're like, it's like the modding menu where you go, shiny lady? The fuck is this? Yeah, the market is literally one of the most confusing places in the game. A lot more people would spend money if it was easier to use. Right, exactly. To be fair, I rarely interact with the actual market. Same. Well, it's because, like, in here, like, if you just go to skin... Well, I guess for Protea, there are no options yet. You go into here, it's like, oh, yes, helmets. Okay, I know what I'm looking at now. Wonderful. I used to open the market and type free for events, and if nothing popped up, I never visited it. Nice. So what do you want the modding to be more like current avionics with the sections for types? Yes, but also no. So I would actually want it to look more like this menu. If that makes sense. Where, like, it's like sectioned off. You'd have like the major types of things up here. So whenever you're looking at your innates, you're like, damage, and then all of the damage effects. Multi-shot, and then all of the multi-shot effects. And then you'd have like a nice search bar where you could be like toxin. And then you'd have all of your stats for your weapon displayed over here. Why have it be just two different mod screens? Why do innates need to not be mods? I mean, they don't absolutely have to not be mods, but I think a visual difference would help it. They could, of course, they could still just be mods. That would be fine. But I think them having a different look would probably be better.
Shut up and take my money.
That would be hard for consoles. Would it really be hard for consoles? I think you need usable tabs / categories to make it less overwhelming. Right. No, that's, yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you have these tabs. You have the everything tab, and then you'd have like multi-shot, damage, elementals. You need a sub-tab. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I don't think there would be that many options in these, right? Like, for elementals, how many options do we have? There would be heat. Well, let's say this is elementals. There'd be heat, toxin, cold, electricity, 90%. There'd be the 60/60s. And then there would be the prime variants under them. Yeah, the IPS mods would be like another section. And that's, what, 8 mods? It's not, I don't think it'd be too overwhelming. Ah, yes, organization. Definitely the last thing that could help the game, honestly. And then, like, what would you have in, like, the damage section? You'd be like, okay, let's see, the most complicated one would be, like, a melee weapon. Where you'd have, like, the umbral module, and then you'd have pressure point, and then you'd have condition overload. This would be nice if the modding screen looked more like the relic screen. Lots of mods on the left with tabs, and your chosen mods on the right. Yeah. Oh yeah, the random element nightmare mods. That's true. There's a couple of those. But I think that's like elements would be the most expansive one, really. And we're talking about like 12 mods, maybe 16 in a couple of years, like that. That doesn't seem like very many. That's not even enough to fill this first page that we can see, right? And people seem to manage this relic screen pretty easily. Be more concerned about an overwhelming amount of categories. Well, let's think about all the things that we've got in here, right? We'd have damage, multi-shot, elementals, crit, which you could put all into one very easily. Very few options there. And then status. And then what's there's got to be one more. Oh, yeah. Punch through. What am I forgetting? Oh, yeah, and fire rate. That's only, what is that, 6? No, 7, like 7 categories. What do you think about a system like D talked about where you can only equip one or whatever amount of mods in a section? That's already a thing. That's just here. What's the one weapon this is like a thing on? Cernos? I think it's the Cernos Prime.
Shut up and take my money.
Yeah, so like split chamber and split flights what is it? Can't be equipped together. This is what they mean by same category. These are both split mods, therefore they cannot be used together. I guess the even more common variant of this is sacrificial pressure and prime pressure point. Can't use them together. Also, Joshman, thank you very much for the resub. Fucking 2 years, dude. Reload, zoom. Why would reload and zoom be in the innates menu? I would keep this modding screen, like, basically the same. Oh god, what was the fucking weapon I was using? I've forgotten its name. It has been lost in my brain. Exceltra. Now I remember its name to save my life. Yeah, I would keep the modding, like, the modding for, like, the interesting mods, I would keep this basically the same. Yeah, have a miscellaneous for, like, some, like, offshoot effects, sure. You could probably combine some things into there, like, you combine, like, punch through and fire rate into that category. Eli, thank you for the resub. Organized school project. I have to make a let's play or review video. How long should the script be? Wait, I have to make a let's play or review video?
Another one, and another one, and another one.
Joshman, thank you for gifting subs to Dubtech, Zap, and Quiet Shy. Much appreciated.
Shman, thank you for gifting subs.
You're saying you want to put those categories for the innate mods, but polarities would still be used for class 2? Yeah, class 1 and class 2. Why don't you use rivens on weapons? I just had a weapon where a riven was equipped. And I don't use a riven on a bunch of weapons because I fucking don't go after rivens because they suck and are bad design. Also, Just, thank you for the 1,000 bits. Much appreciated.
Some past me. Fixing that.
Is it worth grinding something for Railjack before the changes hit? That depends on how deep you want to be into Railjack. I mean, you're going to get, like, the Umbra Forma and stuff if you max it all out and everything. So it really depends on you. Basically, Zyme uses a Riven if he gets them himself. Yep. And I have tons of fucking hilariously broken shit, but it's just on a couple of different things. If Riven stats were controllable and maxable, I think no one would really hate the system anymore. I think that's fair. Oh, also, I never answered that question. Someone was doing a class thing. Working on a school project, I have to make a Let's Play or review video. How long should the script be? So, for a Let's Play, there's usually not a script. And for a review video,
Whoa, that
really
sounded off.
depends. You
The
just say
fuck
how much
did you
you need.
say, Justin? Twat, 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 e.
Just, thank you for the fucking 1100 bits. Project is decently built, and I can solo most missions. Yeah, same. Ribbon stats too low for them to be good compared to the regular mods. So ribbons have this thing called disposition that changes their stats based on usage, essentially. You pet the pupper on stream today? On stream, no. I think it's too late for that. Sleep now. Oh no, he's like should be about to go to sleep. I could go see if Pupper is awake, but probably asleep. I gotta go more water anyway. I'll be right back. But yeah, I mean, this is a very, very long discussion. We kind of rounded about it a few times, but it's like 3 hours long. This would probably be the end of it if it was a YouTube video.